If everyone can take their seats, we're going to get started momentarily. Good evening, everyone. It is 6:00 p.m. on Tuesday, September 13th, 2022. I'd like to call the meeting of the Peoria City Council to order. I'd also like to welcome everyone in our City Council audience, as well as our listening audience at WCBU. I'd also like to welcome the audience watching by channel 22. Clerk, the council mics are open. Please call the roll.
Mayor Ali.
Present.
Councilmember Allen.
Present.
Councilmember Sear. Councilmember Graham.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson.
Here.
Councilmember Jensen. Here. Councilmember Kelly.
Here.
Councilmember Euler.
Here.
Councilmember Riggenbach. Councilmember Ruckriegel. And Councilmember Velpula.
Present.
We have a quorum present, Madam Mayor.
Okay, great. Please join me and stand for a moment of silent prayer or silent reflection, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Madam Clerk, want to get us started?
We are at proclamations.
We have 4 proclamations tonight. The first proclamation is recognizing Hispanic Heritage Month. This proclamation is issued by the city. Whereas the city of Peoria recognizes Hispanic Heritage Month by honoring the histories, cultures, and contributions of our community members and their ancestors who came from Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central and South America. And whereas the city of Peoria is committed to building a welcoming and neighborly community, embracing diversity and fostering equity for every community member. And whereas more than 6% of the city of Peoria's population identifies as Hispanic or Latin American in the 2020 census, and Hispanics make up the largest ethnic minority group in the United States. And whereas September 15th is noted as the start of Hispanic Heritage Month as the anniversary of 1821 independence declarations in 5 Latin American countries, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. Mexico, Chile, and Belize celebrate their independence days on September 16th, September 18th, and September 21, respectively. And whereas we celebrate the cultural heritages of our community members and the diversity they bring to the lives of our neighbors and neighborhood, Hispanics have impacted the culture of the United States, Illinois, and Peoria in areas of business, government, innovation, art, education, and entrepreneurship. Now, therefore, I, Rita Ali, Mayor of the City of Peoria, do hereby acknowledge September 15th through October 15th as Hispanic Heritage Month in Peoria, Illinois. Our next proclamation recognizes National Preparedness Month. We have Jason Marks, our Director of Emergency Management and Preparedness for the Peoria City County Health Department, Peoria County Emergency Management Agency. Mr. Marks, thank you for being here. Okay. The proclamation reads, whereas National Preparedness Month creates an important opportunity for every community member in the city of Peoria to prepare their homes, businesses, and communities for any type of emergency, including natural disasters and potential terrorist attacks. And whereas investing in the preparedness of ourselves, our families, our businesses, and our communities can reduce fatalities and economic devastation in our communities and in our nation. And whereas the Federal Emergency Management Agencies, FEMA, Ready campaign, and other federal, state, local, tribal, territorial, private, and volunteer agencies are working to increase public activities in preparing for emergencies and to educate individuals on how to take action. And whereas emergency preparedness is the responsibility of every community member in the city of Peoria, and all residents are urged to make preparedness a priority and work together as a team to ensure that individuals, families, and communities are prepared for disasters and emergencies of any type. Now, therefore, I, Rita Ali, Mayor of the City of Peoria, do hereby proclaim September 2022 as National Preparedness Month. Mr. Marks?
Well, thank you. I just want to take this opportunity to thank the mayor and the city council for recognizing September as Preparedness Month, and for the collaboration we have with all the city departments in ensuring our community's resilience. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Our next proclamation recognizes Hunger Action Month, and we have Mr. Wayne Cannon of the Peoria Area Food Bank. He's the food bank manager. And Monica Schurer of the Midwest Food Bank. Hello. Whereas childhood cancer is the leading cause of death by disease in children, 1 in 285 children in the United States will be diagnosed by their 20th birthday. And whereas 46 children per day are diagnosed with cancer in the United States, and there are approximately 40,000 children on active treatment at any given time. And whereas the average age of a child, is this the wrong one?
It's this one. That one's the next one.
Oh, thank you. I am so sorry. That didn't seem like it was matching up. Thank you, Stacy. Okay, here we go. Hunger Action Month. Whereas 1 in 9 people in Illinois struggle with hunger every day, including 1 in 6 children. When families are hungry, making healthier choices can be even more difficult. Whereas we are committed to taking steps to combat hunger in every part of our community and providing additional resources for those who live in our communities. And whereas we are committed to working with Food Pantry Network, HOI, which includes Midwest Food Bank and Peoria Area Food Bank, to combat hunger and raise awareness of the need to devote more resources and attention to hunger issues. And whereas more than 12,240 individuals in Tazewell County, 22,590 individuals in Peoria County, and 2,560 individuals in Woodford County are considered food insecure. And whereas the members of Midwest Food Bank and Peoria Area Food Bank distribute meals throughout its network of food pantries, soup kitchens, shelters, mobile food drives, and other community organizations with the support of Food Pantry Network, HOI. And whereas the month of September has been designated Hunger Action Month to bring attention to food insecurity in our communities and to engage the public in action, including volunteer shifts, social media shares, and donations to end hunger, one helping at a time. And whereas food pantries and food banks across the country will host numerous events throughout September to bring awareness and to help end hunger in their local community. Now, therefore, I, Rita Ali, Mayor of the City of Peoria, do hereby proclaim September 2022 as Hunger Action Month.
I'd just also like to thank the many volunteers of the food pantries across the region that we serve and give them thanks as well.
Okay. Alyssa?
Thank you,
Monica.
Mayor Ali and all of the City Council. Midwest Food Bank is working aggressively to combat hunger by supplying emergency food support to over 40 counties in Illinois, Iowa, and Kentucky. But we know that it will also take education and programs that provide families with education and other support that allows them to sustain themselves. This is why Midwest Food Bank is committed to working with organizations like the Peoria Area Food Bank, the Peoria City Council, County Health Department, U of I Extension, OSF, Regional Food Council, and many others through the Healthy Eating, Active Living Food System Partnership that's working very hard. We can't solve this critical problem of food insecurity alone. I'm honored to be here tonight with Wayne to receive this proclamation. Thank you for highlighting this problem, and I ask all within the sound of my voice to take a moment and think about how you can help combat hunger. Then take action. Reach out to those of us that are working at this and get involved. The Hunger Walk is Thursday, September 23rd, and I invite everyone to get involved with that, not only here in Peoria, but in Tazewell County and Woodford County as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica and Wayne, for all that you do to address this issue. Appreciate it. And our last proclamation is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. We have Ian Jones, Morgan Jones. We didn't get Tucker Tuff here tonight, but maybe next time, right? Okay. Whereas childhood cancer is the leading cause of death by disease in children, 1 in 285 children in the United States will be diagnosed by their 20th birthday. Whereas 46 children per day are diagnosed with cancer in the United States, and there are approximately 40,000 children on active treatment at any given time. And whereas the average age of a child diagnosed with cancer is 6 years old, and 80% of childhood cancer patients are diagnosed late with metastatic disease. And whereas in the last 20 years, only 4 new drugs have been approved by the FDA to specifically treat childhood cancer. Whereas the National Cancer Institute recognizes the unique research needs of childhood cancer and the associated need for increased funding to carry this out. The additional financial stress placed on families is one that no one should have to bear. Luckily, hundreds of nonprofit organizations at the local and national level, including the American Childhood Cancer Organization, are helping children with cancer and their families cope through educational, emotional, and financial support. And whereas researchers and healthcare professionals continue to work diligently to treat and cure children with cancer, too many children are affected by this deadly disease, and more must be done to raise awareness and to find a cure. Now, therefore, I, Rita Ali, Mayor of the City of Peoria, do hereby acknowledge September 2022 as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month in Peoria, Illinois. Ms. Jones?
Hello, everyone. I apologize about my voice. My allergies have hit me like a ton of bricks today. But I do want to thank you all again for your continued support in this very important part of my life, as well as many others in your community surrounding you right now. Our son was diagnosed in 2019 with acute lymphoblastic leukemia here in Peoria. His bone marrow is 93% full of cancer. We fought for a very long 2.5 years. Our journey was not easy. Nothing about our treatment was textbook. We went to Memphis, which was very great, and Peoria is a huge staple in St. Jude and everything that they do for all of us. Childhood cancer is ugly and mean and downright uncomfortable to talk about. These kids are only receiving 4% of national funding. So when I'm saying that we are not doing enough for our future, we are not doing enough for our future. The average age of a child to get diagnosed is 6. The average age for an adult is 66. That is a lot of life lost in our future. Sorry.
It's all right.
It's very, very important for you to look at the children surrounding you in this community and see how resilient they are and how hard they fight. No matter a blizzard, a COVID, a shutdown, nothing affects how hard these kids fight and their families. We are asking for your help, we are asking for the attention, and we are asking for the awareness because we cannot do it alone. And our kids deserve so much more than they are receiving right now. So thank you again for proclaiming Childhood Cancer Awareness Month this September. We need to do it every single year. I will do it as long as I can. But thank you all very much.
Thank you. God bless you. At this time, we have a special acknowledgement of fire department promotions. Councilman Greb actually asked for this to be on the agenda because some of us were not able to make it to the badge pinning ceremonies. That's a great idea. Thank you, Councilman. And we have Chief Salenberger, who we no longer have to call interim chief anymore. He's going to introduce the promotions. Chief?
Thank you, everyone. Good evening. Madam Mayor, Mr. Manager, and City Council, it's my pleasure to stand before you today as the new Fire Chief of the Peoria Fire Department. Through this process, Chief Morgan and I had the ability to display our skills and our abilities, and I'm proud to say this command staff is very young. I feel very confident in our abilities to be able to lead this department and continue to provide excellent service to the Peoria community. Chief Morgan is the new Assistant Chief of the Peoria Fire Department. Through this process as well, we had the ability to promote Tony Cummings as the new Division Chief of Operations. That being said, I'm extremely proud of the fact that all three of us are born and raised here, went to school here through the system, Peoria Public Schools, went on off to college, came back, and we're proud to say that we're employed here and be able to represent this community.
Homegrown.
Thank you again. I just wanted to tell you all thank you for allowing us the opportunity to lead this department. Like Chief Sahlberger said, it's just pretty remarkable to know that we were homegrown and came up through the ranks and got educated here locally to be a pillar of this community. We got a lot of exciting things going on. One of our biggest challenges we've been faced with, but we take it as a fun challenge, and that's creating or trying to provide diversity within our department. We got a bunch of different things going on. I like to thank the previous administration for giving us a great platform to build off of, and now we're just taking that baton and we're moving forward. So again, I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to thank the city of Peoria. We're excited about what we got going, and we're going to continue to move this department forward. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
We are at the minutes.
Euler?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I move to approve the minutes of the City Council meeting held on August 23rd, 2022, as printed.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilman Greb. Cast your ballots. Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Clerk?
We have one town item. 22-297 is a request from the town officials to approve the August 2022 actual expenditures and to approve the September 2022 anticipated expenditures for the town of the city of Peoria.
Thank you. Thanks. Councilmember Greb?
Move to approve as outlined.
Seconded by Councilmember Jackson. Any questions, comments? Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
We are at the consent agenda. 22-298 is a communication from the Mayor and Interim Corporation Council with a request to approve the declaration of local state of emergency. 22-299 is a communication with a request to authorize the payment of a workers' compensation settlement in the amount of $148,313.79 to a police officer injured on multiple dates going back to 2014. 22-300 is a communication with a request to authorize the payment of a workers' compensation settlement in the amount of $135,675.27 to a fire captain injured on July 18, 2015. 22-301 is a communication with a request to approve the purchase of a portion of parcel number 18-03-226-006 from Adams Outdoors in the amount of $4,600 and payment for relocation of an existing billboard for the Abington Culvert Replacement Project to Adams Outdoors in the amount of $32,500 for a total of $37,100. 22-302 is a communication with a request to approve a permanent easement agreement with a variance with OSF Healthcare System for the OSF Comprehensive Cancer Center project. 22-303 is a communication with a request to adopt an ordinance approving the Hines Brothers Trucking Partnership Redevelopment Agreement for 2301 West Clark Street. 22-304 is a communication with a request to adopt an ordinance amending the travel policy pertaining to travel, meals, and lodging expenses for the city of Peoria. 22-294 is a communication with a request to concur with the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to adopt an ordinance amending Appendix A of the Unified Development Code relating to data centers. 22-293 is a communication with a request to adopt an ordinance amending Article 19, Operation of a Cannabis Business, of Chapter 18 of the Code of the City of Peoria related to licenses and miscellaneous business regulations. 22-305 is a request to approve the committee report policy session from the August 16, 2022 special city council meeting regarding coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. And 22-306 is a communication with a request to receive and file the month ended July 31, 2022 unaudited financial report. And that concludes our consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any items to remove from consent? Councilmember Jensen?
22-293.
Any other items? Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Councilmember Sears, seconded by Councilmember Ruckriegel. Any other questions? Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-293 is a communication from the City Manager and Interim Corporation Counsel with a request to adopt an ordinance amending Article 19, Operation of a Cannabis Business, of Chapter 18 of the Code of the City of Peoria, related to licenses and miscellaneous business regulations.
Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I pulled this item because I do have some serious reservations about the council adopting an exemption to the limitations that we spent quite a bit of time after a number of policy sessions, a number of discussions around this horseshoe analysis. We also received a lot of public input when we adopted the current restrictions and limitations that we have on the cannabis businesses. So I'm not in favor of doing this. Now, I did contact Corporation Counsel to see if we're required to adopt this exemption because the state has added this exemption for the social equity businesses that got the permit, and I'll let her respond. At this point, she's done some research, and I think she needs to do a little bit more to determine whether or not we're required to do this by the state. So if I could let her go ahead.
If you would first, counsel, kind of for the public's information, kind of describe what the change is, what the amendment is about.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd be happy to. For clarity, our existing ordinance has a definition of minimum distance limitations. That was to restrict cannabis-based businesses from locating within 500 feet of sensitive areas. And we used a broad definition, but it generally includes churches, schools, and daycares. So no cannabis-based business can locate within 500 feet of those. Your existing ordinance does not contain a minimum distance limitation between cannabis businesses. The only restriction would be what is applied in the state statute. And currently, the state statute does not allow cannabis-based businesses to locate within 1,500 feet of each other unless that applicant is a social equity applicant for a dispensary, in which case they may locate within 1,500 feet of an existing licensed dispensary. So what we put in this particular ordinance is under minimum distance limitations. It did state a dispensing organization shall not be located within 1,500 feet of the property lines of a pre-existing dispensing organization unless the applicant is a social equity applicant. So that 1,500-foot limitation does not currently exist in your local ordinance. It's only in the state statute. This would add it locally, but would acknowledge the state's exception for social equity applicants. Now, late this afternoon, Councilwoman Jensen did contact me to ask if we could keep all businesses, even the social equity applicants, at least 1,500 feet from each other. And my answer to her was maybe at this point, because under Section 55-25 of the Cannabis Regulation Act, it gives you a broad authority to do three things. You can certainly have zoning, and we have zoning requirements and special use requirements for those businesses depending on where they want to locate. It gives you the ability to have time, place, and manner restrictions and to determine those sensitive areas, which we did. It also allows you to permit on-site consumption, which our ordinance does not do. The council made a determination to specifically not address that and reserve that for a later discussion. Now, the statute specifically says you could not adopt something more restrictive than in regards to those three things that I just listed. However, then it goes on and lists a number 4 that says that the council could enact an ordinance to prohibit or significantly limit a cannabis business establishment's location. So at this point, to me, the answer is maybe, and we would want to look into some more information about the bill, because having a distance location less than 1,500 square foot or 1,500 feet from another business was really part of the social equity process. On the other hand, you have broad authority to, it appears, impose a greater distance limitation, but we need some more time to sort of reconcile those two parts of the statute.
Does this impact any existing applications?
Yes. No, actually it does not. There are no existing social equity applicants that are locating
Within that parameter?
within that distance. Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Okay. So
And if I could also, looking at this issue, one of the things that this council decided not to do was to limit the number per district, because we were told, and at the time, I believe there was such a limited number of licenses available, we were told there wasn't any way we could have more than, I don't know what it was, 3 or 4 in our police district area, which includes Peoria. So the council decided at that time we would not make more restrictions. But I would like us to revisit the whole thing, because now, under your memo, it looks like there's 9 more possibilities, and I think that's just the social equity ones.
The most recent lottery, the last time I checked, it issued 7 social equity applicants that would be eligible to site within our BLS region. That doesn't mean they would all locate within Peoria, so it would be our 5-county BLS region. And then there will be additional lotteries for there will be an additional lottery for some subsequent dispensary licenses. I don't remember the date that's to be held, but I believe it's before the end of this year.
So I guess, my concern, and one of the things that we talked a lot about, we just don't want them all located, in one area of the city, whether that's one district or one area, to kind of avoid the situation that we have on Knoxville, where we have all those payday loan places in one spot. So that's one of my concerns. I just want to make sure, I'm not against these businesses, but I want to make sure that we don't have too many, that the city's not saturated with them and they're not all located in the same neighborhood or the same council district. So I guess I think I would move to defer this item to get a report back from legal. And I also at some point would like to have further discussion as a council to see if we want to do further restrictions besides what we already have.
You want to defer for 2 weeks then?
Does that give us enough time?
Yes.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Sear. Further discussion, Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Out of respect for my colleague, Councilmember Jensen, I'll support the deferral for 2 weeks because I do want us to make sure that our ordinance is sound and we get this right. That's why I proposed the amendment of making sure that the social equity designation wouldn't transfer with the selling of that license. And so that's how the whole this whole conversation even came back forth. However, I think that it's important that we do our research to make sure that we are promoting the spirit of this social equity designation. And although we may feel that we don't want to have one dispensary here and then the social equity designation dispensary less than 1,500 feet away, the whole purpose of this designation is to give those who haven't had the resources or the ability to participate in this new industry a leg up. And so that leg up may mean purchasing a property that is more affordable for them or more accessible for them, and it might be less than 1,500 feet of that current dispensary. So we just need to make sure that we are seeing what is allowable at the state level, what is happening in other municipalities around the state, to make sure that we are being consistent, because we need to make sure that Peoria is being fair. And I believe that that's what we want to make sure that our ordinance represents. So I just wanted to say that. And I do agree with you, Councilmember Jensen. And I've been on the record of saying this around this horseshoe multiple times, because it seems like these dispensaries are, they like the 4th district. we need to have a strategy, and it may call for a policy session on what is going to be our strategy around dispensaries, because we cannot be reactionary when it comes to this. Because what's going to happen is we're going to start getting more and more applications, and then it's going to put a lot of pressure on us, especially us as district council members who have to field these calls, meet with these businesses, meet with all these constituents who are upset, versus being able to say, hey, this is our strategy and we can manage expectations. Because I don't want this to turn into the short-term rental fiasco that always exists when they come up. So we need to get ahead of this. And so definitely let's fine tune our ordinance. I will support the deferral, but I definitely would support a future policy session on this. Thank you.
Sure. Any other comments? We have a motion. Somebody say something?
Yes,
Oh,
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I will support the deferral as well. I notice oftentimes with many kinds of businesses, birds of a feather like to stick together. You find rows of restaurants. You find rows of car dealers. I don't purport to understand the concentration concept there, but if I would just like to say that if cannabis businesses want to do that, I can't gainsay them. As I think most of the council knows, I was opposed to allowing them in the city of Peoria anyway. But if this is the best way to do business, I'm not opposed to it. So I would, but I will support the deferral. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're very welcome. And I know that October and November are going to be very busy months for us because of budget meetings and discussions, but maybe we can possibly find a time for a policy session just related to the cannabis industry. Okay. For Graham?
Corporation Counsel, how many social equity dispensaries do we currently have in the city of Peoria?
Thank you, Councilman. 0. That lottery was delayed for a couple of years pending litigation, and the initial round of licenses were just issued beginning in July.
So we have 3 right now that are not social equity dispensaries.
None, it's just 2, I believe, and neither one are social equity applicants.
Okay, and could we, and I'm saying this so my constituents can hear it, can we, as part of our policy session, decide we don't want any more of these in Peoria?
You absolutely could put a moratorium on the existing ordinance, yes.
That should be in the mix of our policy session discussion. I'm a little reluctant to put the brake on it now since we don't have one that's social equity oriented. But I would suspect maybe after that would happen, we should take a look at it because, I just don't think this is particularly healthy for our community. And I think 10, 15 years down the road, some people will be asking, what were they thinking of back then? That's how I really feel. So thank you for your answer. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do just want to point out 2 points following Councilman Grebb's comments. The site approval that we approved a few months ago at Associate Bank on Brandywine had the social equity designation. Now, I'm not sure where they are with their process, but we have already approved them, and based off of their social equity designation, they were able to be within less than that 1,500 feet, and that's why they're able to be as close as they are to Trinity. So I do want to point that out. So that is something that we've already approved under the current ordinance. So we want to be very careful of that if we make any amendments that we've already have committed to that one. And then the second point that just escapes me, I wanted to point it out about that one, and it just escaped me. So I defer. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Can you confirm?
Thank you,
Alan just
Madam
said?
Mayor. For clarity, the city actually has 2 processes that someone with a conditional license from the state has to go through. There is a zoning process We generally allow cannabis businesses in all of our industrial zoned designations. They are special uses for the others. Then separately, they have to obtain the business license, and it's the business license section where you have the minimum distance requirement. So I don't believe they have applied for, I don't believe I've seen an application for their business license, but we will confirm that as part of our report back.
Okay. Councilman, you had a follow-up?
It came back to me. The proposal that we have coming before the council on September 27th, which is the old Applebee's site, has the social equity designation. Right. So I wanted to bring that forth as well too. That as we are having these discussions, that is forthcoming in a couple of weeks.
Right. So that was my question about whether we had any pending applicants, but they're not. You said that they're not within that 1,500 feet. Is that correct?
There are no other cannabis-based businesses located near that
parameter.
Former Applebee's.
Right. Okay, thank you. Councilman Graham?
Thank you, Councilor Allen. You're not slipping at all. You're right on the beam. So when I said 3, we actually have 2 with 1 pending.
You have 2 existing businesses, 1 with zoning approval. That business has not yet applied for the business license portion that they would need to operate within the city.
I.e. Brandywine.
Either one. I don't believe I've seen a business license for Brandywine, and we have yet to see the business license for the location that wants to go into the former Applebee's.
Okay, but the Brandywine location would be social equity, and that would be our first social equity cannabis dispensary once it's actually consummated. All the legal permissions are given. So at that point, assuming that happens, we would be up to 3. And then I'm reading about something out at Applebee's, there's 4. Yeah, I really think we need to know. What's that?
Same. That's the same one. The Applebee's social equity, that's the same entity.
But the Brandywine location.
Oh,
is
okay.
social
sorry.
equity 2.
I'm together, right.
So we could conceivably have 4, correct? Boy, it's like first grade here doing the count.
Right.
But yes, no, Councilman Allen, you're right. We need to have a policy session to discuss all the ramifications of this. And Councilor Jensen, thank you for turning the light on this, the spotlight. Thank you.
Okay. All right, we have a motion on the floor to defer for 2 weeks. Any other discussion? Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
We are at first readings. 22-307 is a communication from the City Manager and Interim Corporation Counsel with a request to receive and file a first reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 18, Article 4, Section 18-99 of the Code of the City of Peoria to revise the issuance of video gaming licenses.
Mr. Manager, Council?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Over the past year, I would say in particular, I think the City Manager's Office and Economic Development and Legal Department have received multiple phone calls inquiring about the rationale behind our waiting period for video gaming licenses. Since we weren't here when that original ordinance was put in place, we did some research into figuring out why it sort of came to be, and to be honest, it's not entirely clear to us. So we looked at some other communities to figure out what sort of restrictions they had on their licenses, and we can tell you we purposely looked all over the state of Illinois and can tell you that they are all over the board. Some restrict video gaming altogether, some restrict the number of licenses, some restrict the number of terminals that can be at each facility. Very few, however, have the same sort of waiting period that the city of Peoria has. And by no means am I a mathematician, but from the numbers we looked at, it did not seem that lowering the waiting period really would result in video gaming machines proliferating throughout communities. We looked at communities that didn't have them, that had lower ones than us, and it certainly didn't correlate to an increased number of machines. So we're proposing a new ordinance to shorten our video gaming waiting period from 24 months to 12. But we will say, since we originally drafted this, we're starting to wonder if perhaps 6 months would be more appropriate, since 14 of the communities we looked at actually had no minimum at all. 3 had 6 months, 3 had 12 months. Peoria was the only one with 24 months, and then there's only one community that chose to use waiting periods that had one that was lengthier than the city of Peoria. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Council? Councilman Sear?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One question. If there's a problem with the current rule?
Other than it's resulted in, sort of multiple phone calls from businesses, I can give you, sort of anecdotal stories of businesses that have said they're waiting to open up or they're operating elsewhere, and it seems to be problematic for them to wait. I haven't necessarily documented each and every one of those situations, though.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. If I could follow up on that, I think we've heard from several restaurants that have come into Peoria, that have opened up, that have asked about whether or not they could have video gaming, and we've had to tell them, you have to wait 24 months in order to get video gaming in their establishment. So I think that's one of the rationales behind this, is that new startup restaurants in town, new restaurateurs are having to wait 24 months, and they've expressed to us that waiting period seems pretty excessive.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome.
Madam Mayor?
Hold on just a minute, Councilman Kelly. I've got a few people ahead of you. Councilman Velpula?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When we look at the legislation text, there is, we scouted 15 communities and we found out that 14 doesn't have any minimum requirement. And Peoria has 24 months, and there's one other community that's 36 months. So, now we are moving it to 12 months, right? So what will happen if, I have a two-pronged question. So what will happen if we, instead of, so if you look at the rationale provided, what will happen if we have it to 6 months? Or, and then my second question is, are we going to have a cap like other communities? I just know that some of the communities have capped. You cannot go more than this number. So if we are looking at that, what is your idea on that?
That is certainly the council's prerogative. If you want to look at a cap, we noticed that there were communities that certainly had substantially more terminals than Peoria, but there were obviously other communities that had less. It's hard to give a recommendation because there is really no consistency. So the communities that have a limit on the number of establishments may not have a limit on the number of gaming terminals that each facility can have, and sort of vice versa. So you have some that have an overall, we won't have more than 300 video gaming terminals within our city. Others have said we'll allow all the liquor license holders to have one, but they're limited to a certain number. So it is very difficult to give you a recommendation, which is why we tried to just give you a broad range of what we're seeing throughout the state.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not a huge fan of video gaming per se, but I believe in the spirit of making Peoria more business friendly, we need to really consider either this potential proposal of reducing it to 12 months or meeting in the middle of 18 months, considering the research that you all have done, seeing that 14 local cities don't even have a minimum at all, and Peoria is towards the extensive end with the 24 months, and then there's one behind us that has a 36-month waiting period. So, when I talk to local businesses, and I've had a few that reached out to me that were opening up, whether it was restaurants or a hybrid of a pub, if you will, they voice their concern about this. And so as we are looking to make our city more business friendly, then we need to consider, maybe a happy median. So I would be open to maybe a cap like Councilman Velpula inquired about, or potentially maybe even meeting in the middle of 18 months, just to demonstrate our willingness to work with our local businesses. Thank you.
Welcome. Councilmember Euler?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I was just curious in the discussions, Mr. Manager, that you've had with business owners, is going to 12 enough to help what they're looking for?
Well, I think most new restaurateurs would say, no minimum or 6 months would be ideal. 12 months is better than 24, and 24 is a long period of time.
That's kind of the assessment that I've gotten in discussions that I've had. And so, I personally think it should be less than 12. I don't really think that this is the thing out of the set of things we control here that we should really be going after. If, we already control the number of machines that they have, so what really is the benefit of telling them that you have to wait a year, 18 months, 2 years before you can do it? I'd be more focused on this if the number of machines was unlimited and we were turning it into some of these gambling cafes, but we already deal with that when it comes to the 5 machine rule. So, to me, I would be just fine going to 0, because I don't think that this is the thing that is giving us the control lever here, and it would probably make it more functional for these business owners as they're opening up.
Anything else?
That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilman Rodrigo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. City Manager, if I remember right, when we first were kind of working through this, the 24 months was sort of put in, I think, because we had some concerns from restaurants who were existing that had maybe existed for a while on being able to have that opportunity and to kind of show that it could be done correctly prior to being able to kind of opening it up. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we put the 24-month period in as a way to dissuade the gaming parlors from coming into Peoria. That what we wanted to make sure is that you were operating, you had a restaurant, you were operating it where you had the appropriate threshold of food that was being sold in your establishment, and so that's why we set it up for that period of time. You had to kind of prove up that you were going to be a restaurant.
And as the time since we've had the ordinance in, have you felt that we've had some opportunity to sort of kind of look at that data and make for sure that it's kind of being used in the right way, where it's not gaming parlors, obviously, we know that, but it's an accessory to the restaurant business versus sort of their main thrust?
I would say that the way that we've handled it, we've been largely successful in dealing with that issue.
And I guess I would kind of second Councilmember Euler's comments there is I would look at being comfortable myself, being able to take that time from 24 months down. Personally, I think it ought to be 12 months at the max, maybe even a little bit less than that. Let the business get established. But I think also too, we've had a couple new businesses that have started up. They've come on very, very strong. And right now there's some economic times where these might be the make or break for them being able to exist. And they put a lot of dollars into being able to build out, a lot of efforts into being able to be open. And I think that may be where this request is coming from as well. So I think to be business friendly, we ought to be able to take a look at this and see if we can limit this down. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilmember Riggenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we're seeing kind of a consensus build here that 24 months is excessive, and what would be the appropriate thing. I'm not comfortable moving to no minimum at this point, and I thought the 12 months was a logical step for us, but looking at the numbers that there's 14 municipalities with no minimum at all, I would say that perhaps the 6-month threshold would be something that would be logical for us to move to at this point. And that's not to say that if we find out in a year that we have a proliferation of things that we were trying to avoid with the original intent of the ordinance, that we couldn't change that back to 12 months or something else. So I would make a substitute. Well, there's
It's a first reading.
Oh, so thank you.
You're welcome.
So I would be comfortable moving to 6 months.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Graham?
And you're right, this is a first reading, and where I'm coming from, business people I'm talking to, they're small business people, as Councilor Reckriegel pointed out, who need a little breathing room, and having 24 months is way too long. I hope we'll pass this with 6 months. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Jensen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a question for Corporation Counsel. The way I read it, we do not have a limit on the number of terminals. Is that right? That's the way I read your memo. Is that accurate?
We don't have a limit on the number of licensees. So,
do you have a limit on terminals?
I believe it's 6.
The way I read the council communication, I thought it said there was no cap on either the number of establishments or the number of terminals. It's in the third paragraph.
Well, we will correct that, but I believe we don't have any establishments that have more than 6 licenses.
But you'll let us know? Okay.
So, Woman Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just had one question, and I'm trying to remember back if we had ever inquired. It seemed to me that when this first came to the city, it was thought to be profitable. Have we talked to them in terms, what percentage of their, I was just kind of curious, what percentage of their revenue is video gaming versus food, alcohol? How profitable is it for those establishments? Do we know, or is that information available?
The last attachment in your packet will show you the publicly available report from July. So I don't want to call out any one business in particular.
No, I'm just thinking of
that
numbers.
Information, you can see the income generally made to any that have at least 2. It's generally very profitable.
And if I heard you correctly, did you say the minimum number of licenses, is that 5 or 6?
I don't believe the city ordinance does have a cap on the number of licenses. I think the state law is 6, but I would have to double check that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Velpula?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Corporation Counsel, I have a clarification question. Let's say there are several people, we don't need to call the names of the people who are having these VGTs. Let's say now we come up with the idea saying, an ordinance saying we have, 6 months. Let's say, I'm just telling you a number. Let's say we have a 6-month window where you can open it. So does it, can these, the already established establishments can apply, or is it only for the new?
Good question. This would be for the new applicants. It would not affect any of our existing licenses.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Question. Councilmember Kelly, I have not forgotten about you. Do you want to weigh in still?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I never thought you'd forget me, but yes, I would like to weigh in. Thank you.
Okay.
I would like to ask the manager and or our interim corporation counsel, what is the problem that a waiting period addresses? with video gaming?
Well, Councilman, when the ordinance was established, there was concern over the city seeing a proliferation of establishments that were just video gaming parlors, where there was really no intent to sell any food or beverage. It was really just designed to allow people to come in and gamble. So the intent behind that and the intent behind some of the regulations with requirements on how much food and beverage has to be sold in the establishment was an attempt to regulate that specific activity.
Thank you. And the state doesn't seem to have this same problem. They want people to pile on to the gambling boats and just gamble away. I'm not crazy about the whole idea, but I think that waiting periods with this business are an overreach by us on issues that probably don't really exist. I would be in favor of you bringing back an ordinance, or maybe one of several, that has zero waiting period. I don't think the waiting period addresses any particular problem. As a matter of fact, we have legitimate businesses out there that want to open up that are hamstrung by this rule versus their neighbors. And I'd just as soon get rid of it entirely. So if you could bring back that as one of your ordinances, I would appreciate it, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Kelly. And I'll just weigh in my opinion. I think that anything over 12 months is too much. I could certainly support a 6-month waiting period, but I don't know that zero, like you said, Councilman Riggenbach, I don't know that zero is sufficient, but I think that 6 months could be adequate. So can I get we have a motion to receive and file already on the table. It looks like there's no more discussion. Please cast your ballots. Councilman Kelly?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
We are at regular business. 22-308 is a communication from the City Manager and Director of Public Works with a request for the following. A, approve up to $100,000 for the city's contribution to apply for the Federal Rail Administration Corridor Identification and Development Program, with the remainder of the funds coming from the Tri-County Regional Planning Commission and the North Central Illinois Council of Governments. And B, adopt an ordinance amending the City of Peoria 2022-2023 biennial budget relating to the use of general fund balance in an amount not to exceed $100,000 in 2022, and we will need 2 separate motions.
Okay. Manager, do you want to lead in? And then we've got
Sure.
several
Thank you,
comments and a
Mayor.
guest.
As you know, as all of the council members know, we in July released the rail feasibility study that looked at passenger rail service between Peoria, heading up to LaSalle, Peru, over to Ottawa, into Morris, and then Joliet, and then into Chicago. We did a survey as part of that. We had over 31,000 responses. It was a phenomenal response rate coming back. And in that feasibility study, it said that the ridership and the interest was significantly high enough and sufficiently high enough for us to consider moving on into the next steps. And the next steps really come from the federal government. There's over $66 billion of money in the infrastructure bill that was just passed that will be going towards passenger rail and rail throughout the United States. Of that, there's actually 2 funding opportunities. When we drafted this council communication, we thought there was only one, and then last week the Federal Rail Administration released a second funding opportunity that allows for us to pursue 2 routes towards trying to get funding for a service development plan. The first is that's open right now is the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvement Grant Program. That's $150 million across the United States. The grant is due December 1. The second will be, we anticipate, will be coming out probably in October in the fourth quarter of this year, and that is the Corridor Identification and Development Program. And what the Federal Rail Administration is trying to do is to get routes like Peoria's route, the route that we're advocating for, into the pipeline of potentially new rail services that would start throughout the United States. We talked with the engineering team of Patrick Engineering and Hansen Engineering. Hansen did the portion of the station locations, and then Patrick did the larger feasibility study. We talked to them about what the cost would be for us to prepare applications. They came back and said it's going to be about $200,000 to $250,000 for us to apply. So originally we had talked to Tri-County Regional Planning Commission. They have approved $50,000 to go towards the study. We stated that we would come to you with a request for $100,000. In addition, Peoria County took up an action item on this last week and decided to put $50,000 towards that. So we currently have $100,000 funded towards this. That would leave the remainder to come from the governments up in the northern Illinois River Valley, the Council of Governments. So LaSalle, Peru, Ottawa, Morris, those communities up. What we're asking for this evening is your consideration of setting aside $100,000 of fund balance towards this initiative. We will be coming back to you with an intergovernmental agreement on how we would structure all of this. But with a December 1st deadline for the first application, we would be getting to work right away to try and get our applications in for these grant funds.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. And I would add that there's been, over the past little bit over a year, a lot of collaboration, a lot of effort from multiple partners. The state, IDOT, has been just a great partner, and one milestone that has occurred is that they are going to add the Peoria rail line to the state plan. That's huge. One requirement of the FRA's corridor identification project is that you have to be part of your state's plan. Well, they're adding us probably this quarter to the state's plan. But this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to secure the type of funding that's available from the federal government. And if we don't start now, we'll miss out on a great opportunity. So I would first turn over to my colleague, Council Member Ruckriegel, who's been part of that rail leadership team, if you would talk about the interest survey. And then I'm going to ask former U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Ray LaHood, who's been the co-chair for a little bit over a year, and he's been also meeting with key leaders at Amtrak and the FRA, Federal Railroad Administration, out of Washington, D.C., and he's brought us into those discussions. So, Councilman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And, to echo a couple of words you said there, the collaboration that has come together to be able to bring this to light, I think, has been tremendous, and it has actually put a lot of energy and focus to be able to make this happen so quickly. It's hard to believe that in less than a year we've actually made it to this point. And, we talked about 31,000 surveys that came in a very, very short time because we only had a concerted amount of time to be able to get input from the public. But what they said was amazingly important. 95% of all of those surveys came back as very likely or likely to be able to use this form of transportation and want to be able to use this. And when you look at the breakdown of why they would use it, it was really interesting as well, because while 97.7% of those that would use it would be using it for pleasure purposes and to be able to get for entertainment back and forth to different places, 41% of people surveyed would like to be able to use it for business as well. And I think that goes back to the economic impact that this could have for our region as we continue to grow. And in that is 14.1% of those surveyed want to be able to use it for college and educational purposes. Another great piece. All this is included in our packet, but I think it's important for the public to also realize what we're seeing back from those surveys. Because people go, well, what is it? It's just Peoria. And I'm like, no, it isn't. When we look at where those surveys came from, they came from all parts of our region. They came from the other side of the river, from our communities in surrounding counties that would actually be coming to Peoria to be able to get on those trains. That brings us economic development. It brings us economic dollars into our system. And we also saw a significant amount of people in Chicago who want to come this way. And I think that lends to our entertainment ability and our ability to offer a variety of business opportunities as well that they can be coming down for. And the last thing that I'd like to just kind of point out from the survey is I moved here in '92, and people were talking about the train and what it would mean to get service back. And I don't ever hear people talk about what it was. I hear people talk about what it can be and what it may be. The other night at the Peoria County meeting on this, probably the most prophetic words were said, which was, we know what happens if we don't do this study. We get no train. But we don't know what happens if we make for sure, we take a chance and we fight for our right to be able to get this train here by doing this study. This is the next step to be able to make this happen. And we've got dollars in the federal budget that have never been there, and I think that's going to be talked about by the next speaker in a little bit. But I would ask all my colleagues around this horseshoe to happily come into play with our partners in the area to be able to fund this so that we can take the next step. As you said, we've gotten onto the master rail plan here, which is great. But I'm going to go back to that little thing about generation. When we looked at the surveys that came back, a significant portion of our people were 25 to 40, 41 to 62, and we also had people who were younger than 25. All ages want to be able to see this come here, and we see a significant group there that when this comes, and it may take 7 or 8, 9 years to be able to do, they're going to be ready to be able to take this and make it happen. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Allen, did you have a comment before I bring up the next speaker?
Yeah, sure. I would like to just echo the sentiments of Councilman Rodrigo and the excitement around this project and the potential of it. Is great for our region and specifically for our city. I ran into an older gentleman of mine and friend of mine, and he said, make sure you bring that train to Peoria. And I was like, all right, well, I ain't got that much juice, but I'll do what I can. So Peoria is very excited about this. I think it's good that other entities are participating in the potential payment of this feasibility study. And to hear 8 or 9 years from now, I think about, wow, my kids possibly taking this train when they go off to college, and I'm excited to get them out the house. But at the end of the day, too, though, that's exciting because we're thinking about the future of our city with this project. So I just wanted to provide some comments on that.
Thank you. You've got the juice. I mean, it takes all of us to make it happen, truly. Councilman Graham?
Manager, at the beginning of our discussion here, did you indicate there was another revenue stream we could access?
There's actually 2 funding streams that are open now that for application, and we did check with the Federal Rail Administration, and they encouraged us to go down both paths. So there's 2 grant applications that are very similar, and it just allows us to potentially access funds from 2 different pots.
They encouraged you to go with what? I'm sorry.
They encouraged us to go down to apply for both grant applications. So,
would this possibly reduce the amount of time for this project if we have a lot of green lights, no red lights, to 6 years?
I think I wish it could, but getting into the pipeline with the Federal Rail Administration is of utmost importance for this to go forward. So we've got to get this next hurdle.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Jackson, then I'll have Secretary come up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I just want to say I'm extremely excited about this opportunity. I remember, it's probably, I'm sure it was less than 10 years ago that there was so much conversation about the multimodal project that took place over in Bloomington Normal. And yet at that particular time, there was not at least the amount of money available that we've heard about this time around. So what excites me is I believe they were able to do it in less than 10 years, far less than 10 years. And with the amount of support and funding that is available out there, I know there's been talk about 10-year wait, but I am so excited. I hope we're able to do it sooner than they were able to do it. And I think it was less than 5 years. So kudos to you, Mayor, for moving this project forward. And I hope that all of us here in Peoria will do what we probably should have done some time ago. So thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. I hope to beat that 10-year mark as well. Former Secretary of Transportation Ray LaHood has put in countless hours in this project in terms of not just the meeting time, but the behind-the-scenes time that has went into this. So I want to say thank you for your leadership, continued leadership in our community and for Peoria and Central Illinois.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and to the members of the City Council, thank you for lending a little time to this very important subject. I really want to congratulate the mayor for her vision on this. When the mayor, right after her election, she and I spoke about her vision for rail service. I really had no idea that the stars would all be aligned correctly. And what I mean by that is, several years ago, Mayor Artis asked me to get involved in a rail study, and we knew there was a lot of interest, but the problem, there was no money. Today, the money is there. The money is there thanks to the leadership of President Biden and his administration to pass $1 trillion transportation bill, of which $66 billion is for rail. Mainly because President Biden is a rail person. I think all of you know that he spent his career in the Senate and rode the train every day from Wilmington, Delaware, to the U.S. Capitol. He believes in rail, and the administration has put their money where their mouth is. And it's a rare opportunity in our country when you can have a vision, as the mayor does, as Councilman Rodrigo does, and others, and have the money available to do it. Now, this is not inexpensive. If this goes forward, we're talking about $2.5 billion, and that money will be spent to fix up a corridor that currently exists but needs improvement. So this is an investment in a corridor all across Illinois, not just in Central Illinois. And just one example that I used while I was at the Department of Transportation, if you build it, they will come. You all remember what that area of Normal looked like before they built an Amtrak station. Go over there today, the Children's Museum, all kinds of small businesses, hotels, and that is what will happen along this corridor if the investment is made. Along the corridor, where they'll have to build train stations for this train to stop in LaSalle, Purdue, and Morris, and Utica, and Starved Rock, there'll be businesses that will pop up, and that will mean jobs. The construction of this infrastructure will mean jobs. It's an investment, it's an economic development opportunity that will only come once in your lifetime. This is it. And it's not for you. Some of you won't ride this train. I probably won't ride it. But it's for the future of the corridor and our kids and our grandkids and the opportunity for economic development. Don't let it pass us by. Just simply don't. This is about the future. It's about economic development. It's about jobs, and it's about an opportunity that Peoria will not see again in a long time. Thank you very much.
I'm going to ask for a motion. Councilman Rodrigo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to make a motion that for 22-308, Part A.
Okay. Seconded by Councilmember Allen. Discussion. Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Kelly?
No.
Okay. Motion passes, 1 nay. Kelly? Councilmember Rodrigo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to make a motion for 22-308, item number B.
Okay, seconded by Councilmember Jackson. Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Kelly?
No.
Motion passes, 1 nay. Kelly? Okay. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
22-309 is a communication from the city manager with a request to receive and file a discussion on the 2023 through 2027 at-large council compensation.
Thank you. I'm actually going to let our interim corporation counsel take this one.
Sure. Counsel?
Thank you. As you know, council members will be required to set the compensation for those that begin their terms on May 9th, 2023, and we will have to have that set by November 10th of 2022. The city manager directed us to do a compensation survey from the 15 most populous cities in Illinois, and that has been attached for your review. You can see that, much like video gaming, there is a broad range of how communities compensate their city council members.
Okay. Councilmember Graham?
Yes, and Corporation Counsel Kapuska, you said if I could see it. I have never seen.
I can't see it either. It did print rather small, didn't it?
It's tiny.
Well, I would just move that we keep the compensation package identical to what it is right now. And I did get my magnifying glass out at home, so I would make that motion.
Seconded by Councilmember Valpula. Any other discussion?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Councilman Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like us to consider something that involves accountability for us doing our job with our compensation. I believe that the best report card on our performance as a group is our assessed value. And if our assessed value rises, I think that says that a rise of the same percentage is reasonable. And if our assessed value declines, then I think that we should suffer a decline. We kind of sit and say, yes, let's keep everything the same. Let's keep everything the same. We should have some way of being accountable for the job we are doing here. And it seems to me that the best report card that we have would be assessed value. And I would like a report back from the And this would not only be for at-large, but also for district council people. I know that that's not on the agenda tonight, but I'd like to have a report back to see what would have happened to our compensation over the last 10 years or so. It isn't urgent from the manager, just to see, because it seems to me that if our city is not growing, if our city is not, or is even in decline, we should suffer part of those consequences. And if the things that we're doing around the horseshoe are worthwhile for our city, and our city grows, well, fine. But just to sort of sit in the same place every year and, is not particularly appealing to me, although I suspect this motion will pass. But Mr. Manager, if you could bring that back to us regardless of the outcome of this particular vote, I would appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have my Granicus on my iPad, so I was able to zoom in on the compensation on the spreadsheet there. And just for the listening audience, when you look at the council member at large salary, we're ranked, looks like maybe 4th in the state of Illinois, and other comparable cities are Aurora, Bolingbrook, Waukegan. And so, these are cities similar size of Peoria as far as population, a little less when you look at, looks like Bolingbrook and Naperville. So just to provide some context to the listening audience, I agree with keeping the compensation and the benefits the same right now. I think that when we think about what we're voting on, we're not voting on us being in these currencies, but those who will come after us. And I think we need to make being an elected official still be attractive, because at the end of the day, these are part-time positions. We want it to be attractive. We want people who bring diverse ideas, people who are diverse in general, from different age demographics and different demographics in general. And you have to have some type of attractive benefit. And so I understand where Councilman Kelly's coming from as well too, but I'm struggling with figuring out what objective way are you going to be able to determine how successful each of us are, because we're dealing with a lot of issues that have been plaguing our city for decades. And you might not see we could be voting on great ordinances and legislation and all types of stuff, but we might not see the dividend of that for a generation from now. So I think it's very hard for us to be measured off of that as well too. But I just wanted to provide some context on the current compensation, and I'm supportive of it.
Thank you. Many times the value is assessed through an election. Councilwoman Jensen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question. I guess, when was the last time that we've increased the salary? Do you know, for a council member? Because I've been on the council almost 10 years, and I don't recall us ever increasing the salary. Not that I'm proposing that we should, but I just think that that's an important fact that people should know. I don't think we've ever increased it.
I'm not sure. We would have to ask the city clerk to look into that.
It has been increased over
time,
but maybe
correct.
Many
but
years
not
ago,
in a
just
long
because
time.
I remember many years ago. But we can certainly
It's helpful
ask to bring that
information
back.
for the
Sure.
public to have.
Sure.
And with regards to Councilman Kelly's proposal, I don't think the assessed value is a fair measure of how we're doing our jobs. There's so many other factors about the assessed value that have nothing to do with our performance. And we could do everything perfect, as my realtor colleague over here said, and the assessed value could still go down. There's too many other factors that determine that. So I'm not in favor of doing that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Council?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For clarity, tonight's item was just for discussion, so we knew what type of ordinance to bring back or what additional information may be needed. So we will work with the clerk and certainly see the last time there was an increase and provide that. But as to Councilman Kelly's proposal, the statute is very clear that once the salary is set, it cannot be adjusted for the term of those individuals that are elected.
Sure. Okay. So we had a motion to receive and file that was seconded earlier. Is there any other discussion? Please cast your ballots. For Kelly? Councilmember Kelly? The motion is to receive and file. Did we lose him?
Aye, I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-310 is a communication from the City Manager and Interim Corporation Counsel with a request for the following. A, to receive and file a presentation from Peoria Innovation Hub doing business as Distillery Labs regarding the Smart City Initiative and Smart City Brokerage Agreement. And B, approve the Smart City Brokerage Agreement between the City of Peoria and Peoria Innovation Hub doing business as Distillery Labs. And on your desk, there is a yellow handout with the presentation.
Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have with us tonight, we have Kurt Biobloreski. I always mess up your name, Kurt, sorry. Who is with Distillery Labs, who is going to walk through the presentation. And I know you have a few other members of the Distillery Labs group with you, as well as Bradley University. So I'll turn it over to Kurt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Manager, and thanks to the council for having us here this evening to talk about this very exciting project that we have ongoing through Distillery Labs. Thought tonight we'd give a little bit of background on Distillery Labs just to refresh everyone's memory as to where we're at, and then get into a little bit of the background and the description of what the meat of the presentation is on this brokerage agreement. So first, Distillery Labs is meant to really be an economic development tool for the city of Peoria, for the region of Peoria, but within the city of Peoria, to be nationally recognized as a startup hub for entrepreneurs to come from all over and to start and grow businesses, and do that both if you're a citizen of Peoria in the region, but also if you're from outside of the area. As we've talked about, and I've heard everybody talk about economic development tonight and what that means, and a lot of that is population growth, getting more people here, and then adding to the existing businesses that we have. The mission of doing that is really completed through connecting people, that's resources that are here, with ideas and all the different things that go on with starting a business. We talked about supporting businesses tonight and being able to keep them going and moving forward, and doing that within the greater Peoria region so we can achieve that economic development goal. So more about Distillery Labs. What it's really meant to do is to bridge corporate innovation, research and development from Bradley University and the Illinois Innovation Network, as well as access markets of help entrepreneurs access markets to be able to pilot their ideas, to work through the different things that they're looking at. So this little slide here describes how that would work. A lot of times, startups may need to work with the city of Peoria to pilot a smart and connected city, a connected community innovation to see if it works, or they need to work with the organization that I actually work with, Hanson Professional Services, to get access to our customers to help bring those things to fruition and get their business started. So the first initiative inside of Distillery Labs, we call it the SIL, but it's the Central Illinois Living Laboratory. And the idea of that was based on some examples that were ongoing in bigger communities around the country, in and around smart and connected communities. And it was to create a real-world testing environment that allowed folks to go out into the right-of-way and to try out their ideas to see if there's actually a value proposition for them, and work through that idea and those business models that would be associated with it. It's really been one of the struggles in getting what we've seen throughout the industry is in getting smart and connected communities and businesses and things associated with that is that they don't really have that access and that ability to do that. Rightfully so, because the public right-of-way is a very serious place to be. And it's not theirs to oversee with public safety and those things, but it is one of the big struggles. Bigger communities, and we've also seen that this is happening in communities like Dallas, Columbus, Ohio, some bigger communities, and they've seen lots of economic development around it. But what really hasn't happened, and this kind of is the play on words that come to, kind of play in Peoria, is that it's hard for those technologies to scale backwards into, what our communities our size, but it's easier for those communities to scale up. So this first initiative is to really get people here, to try things out, to get them going, give them the resources that are necessary, and move forward. So within SIL, we'd be looking at things in and around mobility, economic opportunity, and public safety, and environmental sustainability, and health and well-being, and all doing it through diversity, equity, and inclusion type benchmarks, making sure that we're providing better services through civic innovation, even to everyone that is in the community and in the area. So this is the phase one here. It's a map, and you might need your magnifying glass again to see it. But as we look at it here, it's generally Main Street all the way around down Western, and then up Adams and back to Main. And then down through kind of bisecting that in both directions, University and MacArthur, and then I believe it's Martin Luther King and John Glenn, across that zone. So the idea there is that we would give, that this agreement would help entrepreneurs to be able to have access to test some ideas or some equipment in that zone under very specific provisions, but this is where it would take place. So through our research and looking at best practices, there was really three things that are needed within this area to make all this come to fruition. First is right-of-way access and data sharing agreements, so that any data that's gathered that doesn't involve intellectual property would be a part of Distillery Lab, or be available at Distillery Labs for folks. And then to have that data warehouse. And then second is to have a 3D digital twin of the region that you just saw and those streets and rights of way that you just saw. They're both above ground and below ground. So on the right-of-way and data sharing, the first thing that I've kind of dropped in some of these things as we've talked about, but the reasons for the brokerage agreement is that normally for someone to do something like this, they would have to, or a startup, to get access to the right-of-way to take their technology or their business model out there, they would need to apply for a permit to install it and go through and look at it, have city staff through Public Works generally to go through and look at it, all the different attributes and the reasons and everything that's going on with it and how the built environment would be changed. The idea here, and we've seen this in Dallas, that's been helpful in getting people out there and to do these things, is that we worked with Interim Corporation Council to develop the most necessary things that would have to be done, things like public safety, the 911 system, privacy rights, those kinds of things would have to be adhered to, and the startup would have to give a plan for how that would happen. But the idea being that Distillery Labs would vet, and that their staff would vet the majority of that and then bring it to the city and to then Public Works or other staff, and as necessary, planning and zoning staff maybe, as necessary as it went forward. So that's the general idea, is to take some of that burden off of city staff, but to streamline that process as best as possible so that there's not long waits to have this happen, because technology and innovation happens pretty quick. Even they coined the phrase fail forward to make sure that happens as fast as possible. So from there's also some data sharing. I alluded to this earlier, but if there's data that's collected in the right-of-way and it doesn't include any intellectual property, it would be shared both to the city staff, to Distillery Labs, just to the general Distillery Labs community as it stands. The last part here is on the next steps that would happen. If you think about it, it's kind of Distillery Labs is that broker. It's the middle person in that agreement. They would need to have what we call a sponsor agreement with the startups or the corporations that would be doing this work in the right of way, and that's the next step. And if this is something that the city is amenable to, then that would begin to move forward pretty quickly here, because we actually already have 4 startups that are excited about the opportunity to come into to the city and to do some of their piloting and helping actually Public Works' mission and taking a look at their sidewalk plan so that we can see what is up to date, even looking at starting to create that 3D digital twin of the underground facilities so that we could see where utilities are, what the pavement structures are, those kinds of things. So all of that is something that's ongoing, and that we would be able to really kickstart and get these startups into the Central Illinois Living Laboratory. So with that, I'd like to take any questions and hopefully be able to answer them as best I can. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Of course, I'm excited about any smart city initiatives that come our way, but I'm going to lead off with some questions that I have, and the first relates to the map on page 13. Shows the kind of geographic area. And can you give some additional rationale on how this area was selected?
The rationale comes from the idea of looking at neighborhoods and creating, when we start looking at mobility or other things that are going on in the area, we would really want to go and look at providing better service for those types of things. Also, in the terms of civic innovation, and services that are provided to these zones. This is the heart of Peoria, and there's some historically disinvested neighborhoods in this area, and we're trying to connect them to uses that they would have. So the idea is that Distillery Labs, being a DEI type, have DEI type KPIs and initiatives, that these civic innovations would be used to improve services in this zone, and so that's why this was.
Sure. No, I think it's probably the right area, but it's like you say, some of the areas are those areas that have been disinvested. So they have, in terms of utility poles, they're the old wood poles. They don't always have the LED lighting. They have greater needs for, LED and smart technology, I would say, but it's going to be more costly, right?
It likely would be, but the idea is that we have to start somewhere and designate the areas that we want to be able to provide these potentially improved services to.
Okay, so it's going to require a lot of collaboration, right,
It sure
with
will.
Ameren and other partners. So I have a question for the manager. This agreement with Distillery Labs won't prohibit us from collaborating with additional partners on smart city initiatives?
No.
Not at all. Okay. Councilman Velpula?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. But to start off, my question is to the city manager. So, in listening to this objective, what is our financial obligation towards the Distillery Labs?
Well, the City Council approved providing $100,000 of support to Distillery Labs out of the American Rescue Plan Fund. So some of that funding has been going to support, the efforts and development of Distillery Labs. But again, trying to encourage that startup economy, that was one of the areas that we wanted to provide that level of support.
So this 100,000 was allocated in 2021-2022 budget.
Correct.
And we are now going to deal with the 2022-2023 budget.
Correct.
So my question is, what is our next plan if we adopt an agreement this night?
Another $100,000 is recommended for 2023. We talked about that during the policy session that we had on the American Rescue Plan funds.
My question is, what happened? So for example, we make a lot of issue when we wanted to spend some money on certain things. I know this is all about innovation, but what was done with the 100,000 that we gave? What progress was made? I haven't known that. And then also, I understand the whole of it. For me, I come from a scientific background. I understand totally what was presented there. But for me, everything was vague. We'll say we'll bring partners, we connect new ideas. It's more like a parallel government. In fact, what my heart says is that we improve our own economic development, team. We can clone 5 more Kevin events, and then lead off when something comes to the city, probably allocate it to the partners. This kind of blanketed approach is just, washing of hands. And I would really I'm not in favor of it, but at the same time, I like the idea. But for me, I think there should be a more meat to the bone before we even do something. I mean, I went to Distillery Labs, just a simple search. It gives me nothing. I didn't find anybody who's running the Distillery Labs. So I don't know whether they have a critical mass to do this. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I didn't know how to search it. But my opinion is very strong in this regard. I just wanted to lean off here. Thank you so much.
Councilman, if I could address that. So, Chris Setti, I'm the CEO of the Greater Peoria Economic Development Council. I am serving as the interim executive director of Distillery Labs. And I can tell you that we're very active, and I'm sorry if our SEO on our search engine optimization may not be as great as it is. We actually just invited everybody to an event that we're having next Wednesday night. So we've actually been very active. And your funding is to help us with our programming, which we've been doing. Every month we've had a social event. Every month we've had educational events. We have, through the G-Beta program, which is a business accelerator, we graduated 5 companies through that. It was back early last year. One of them who's doing really well is a company called We Hear You, which was a Bradley student project. They went through the Brave Launch program. They went through the G-Beta Accelerator, and now they're in a program called iVentures. We just graduated another 5 companies through that cohort. That's what is the Wednesday night event at the Scottish Rite Theater, is to hear their pitches. So the idea behind Distillery Labs, we are in the process of building this facility, which will be a physical location on Adams Street in the old ICC Thomas building. I hoped to have been able to stand up here tonight and tell you that we were under construction. Like any of you who have tried to build anything in the last 6 to 8 months, the cost of construction has just galloped out of control. So when we went out to bid, our bids came in about 35% higher than the estimates we had. So we are in a process of redesign, or I should say more like value engineering more than redesign. And that process should end here in the next month or so, and we would hope to be under construction at the beginning of the year so that we're open in 2023. But the whole point behind things like this is that we aren't waiting for the building to be open in order to do this work. So this brokerage agreement is actually an asset that then we can market on behalf of the city of Peoria and the region. When we talk about Distillery Labs, we talk about how it will provide an opportunity for local Peorians to be entrepreneurs and give them the sorts of resources that Kurt talked about. But it's also a really great opportunity to attract companies as well. And this brokerage agreement is one of those. A couple of the that Kurt mentioned, that we have 4 startups. One of them is from Carnegie Mellon, which is in Pittsburgh. I think one of them might be a Canadian firm.
We have Mach9 Robotics from Carnegie Mellon University. We have Deep Walk from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. We have Grid Matrix, who I believe is based in Silicon Valley. I think there's some Apple alums that decided to start their own business. And then our 4th one is actually from the G-Beta program from Grand Rapids, Michigan. They went through, or she went through it's Onnit Solutions, and she went through the G-Beta Accelerator for Smart and Connected Communities in Indianapolis. And then from there, Chris's staff identified her as someone who maybe who needed to pilot and could get into this early part of the Distillery Labs work, and moved that into working through that with Bradley University and the civil engineering department there. I think they're going to help her a little bit with her. She has a safe pedestrian crossing solution that she's wanting to try out. So it's completely a team effort, and bringing those folks into into the living lab, really, and along with the G-Beta network and having them together, along with just the entire ecosystem within Peoria, starts to give startups and other small businesses some opportunities, especially in these very tech in these tech type situations where they're pretty capital intensive. You think about the lady from Onnit Solutions with her prototypes. She has to get them printed. She has to get them installed. It's a pretty big endeavor, pretty capital intensive effort that she has to go through to get that done. So it really gives her an opportunity to get in and work through that piece.
And Kurt and Mr. Steady, I think that, there's a lot of things that you're doing, but some people are not aware of all those things that you're doing. I mean, just hearing from Councilman Velpula, he was not aware of some of these things that you're doing. And if there's some way that you could document, over the past year, what has taken place, because I think that there was a lot of momentum. And then I know that Mr. Lehman, the former director, who's still involved, right? He's still involved to some degree, took another job elsewhere. So.
Well, actually, his wife took another job that was in Washington, D.C., and he decided that he wanted to still be with her. So he did leave us. But I'm happy. We'd be happy. We do produce reports for our own board of directors, and there's a lot of things that have been going on. I think I sent an email to all of you over the weekend. It's at the Scottish Rite. There's two events. One is from 3:30 to 5 o'clock, and it's an opportunity to have conversations with other entrepreneurs and innovators around specific areas of innovation. But then in the evening, starting at 5:30, is kind of what we're calling the Startup Showcase, which will include a keynote speech by Steve Zika of natural fiber welding, but then also the pitch night for these five companies that just went through the G-Beta. All five of them are local Peoria area companies. And so I will take it as my fault if you don't know what we're doing. I would encourage you to just be connected through our social media channels. I sometimes feel that there's never been so many ways of communicating information to people, and yet it's so much harder to find things because you're thrown so much, and especially as city council people, so much information. So I would encourage you to use our social media channels, but we'll make sure you get on our mailing lists too.
Mr. Sethi, it's not like I don't know what's happening because the first batch of G-Beta people, we actually interacted with them to see if we can help them grow in a different fashion. My point is not to discourage you or my point is to see why do we need a blanketed agreement? Why do we need to have a middleman in this?
So I think I can answer that and Kurt's obviously as an engineer and a professional in this can give you some technical reasons. But this is a streamlined process that we will be able to offer as so that not every startup that wants to utilize the city right away has to approach the city council for a permit and go through this process every time. The idea behind the brokerage agreement is you're giving us some rights to work with your staff to offer these things to startups, and I will tell you that in the conversations we've had with these startups, they are surprised that we may have this, that they don't have to negotiate this. It provides a standard set of language of things that they can expect that if they can clear these hurdles, that they'll be able to utilize the city of right-of-way with all the safety measures in place. Some of these things that we're talking about is them being able to scan with LiDAR, scan your sidewalks and collect data. So we're not talking about interactions of like changing your streetlights or anything like that. But this is what the city of Dallas did with their Dallas Innovation District, is to provide this as an incentive for these companies. If a company from Pittsburgh, from Carnegie Mellon, is interested in coming to Peoria, one of the reasons they're interested is this brokerage agreement.
Got it. Thank you.
Councilmember Euler?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Just for clarification, maybe this is a different kind of brokerage agreement than what I'm used to, but is there a fee that we're paying for a service to them? It's just a relationship agreement, basically. Okay, thank you.
Welcome, good question. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councilman Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm a little at sea about what this is. You say we have a great way of scanning sidewalks. It seems to me that that's a pretty narrow innovation. Are we talking about running fiber under the streets? Are we talking what's the emphasis on right of way?
To answer your question, Councilman, the emphasis is to be able to do work and maybe to put some appurtenances in the right of way, or even to just be on it to collect data from it. These are public rights of way, so you can collect some data, but in some instances you would need to do some surveying and have maybe somebody with an instrument within the right of way. In the case of the Grid Matrix folks, which is one of the startups in there, that they would be wanting, they'd end up needing to work through with Public Works how they could attach some cameras to a mast arm out or to a traffic signal. They'd have their own network and those kinds of things, but they need to be able to, their artificial intelligence algorithms need to be able to see how cars are moving and to be able to collect the climate data as well as the near miss crash data that they can identify at the or they believe they can identify at the intersection that they would be installing this work at. So those kinds of things, once they would, as just to learn through 4 examples, what I would call it, to be able to provide that kind of, if they provided the information to show how they would connect to that pole in the right of way, then from there, Distillery Labs staff would vet that and then bring it to Public Works or to get the permit to be able to do so. They would also, that startup would have to sign the sponsor agreement with Distillery Labs saying that they were essentially bound by the terms that are within this agreement that was presented, or that was in your packet, I believe.
So are you about right-of-way primarily?
Excuse me, I didn't quite catch that.
Are you about public right-of-way primarily?
Yes, we would be within the public right-of-way primarily.
And our existing institutions really can't do this or can't advocate for this. We've got Chamber of Commerce, we've got the EDC, we've got Peoria Next, we've got the Peoria Innovation District, we've got the Downtown Technology Center. We've got, every couple of years we have another high-tech thing that has all this promise, and yet I don't know how much it. I mean, if somebody wanted to have cameras above the right-of-way in downtown or someplace to collect data for some good reason, what is the problem with them going through the regular procedure? And why is it that you're going to broker these city services to other people? Are there going to be other brokers as well? And are we going to start brokering? I really don't understand the reason. I know your intentions are good, but I don't really understand the value here that we don't already have.
So I think the bigger value is it sets a floor for the startups and the entrepreneurs to know what they're able to do, and it also is a timing issue and the speed at which that the permits and other things can be turned around. I think there's quite a bit of value to the entrepreneur to be able to get in pretty quickly once this kind of stuff is in place, which is I think fairly well out, or I believe it's outlined in the agreement how that would happen. So
how many entrepreneurs do we have that want to put cameras up or want to run some fiber under the street? Or I mean, how many entrepreneurs are we talking about here?
Well, right now we have 4 that are waiting to be able to get in. They could go through the regular city permitting process to do so if this wouldn't pass tonight.
Yeah, but I mean, how difficult would that be?
I haven't had that experience, but I would suspect it would. Normal permit process is months, I would guess.
A couple months. Councilman, this is Patrick. It's a couple of months it would take for them to run through the process if they're doing it through us. This is, again, an effort to establish Peoria, and the Peoria business community is saying they would like to support and encourage startups to look at how they can use the rights of way in our city to test their ideas and test their capabilities of what they might want to bring to market. And this is simply our opportunity to set the agreement forward in order to encourage that through Distillery Labs. That's the rationale behind this.
Why can't we do that, Mr. Manager?
We have funded Distillery Labs to the tune of $100,000.
No. Why can't the City Hall do that?
Because we are, through this brokerage agreement, we're encouraging them. This is an opportunity to work with the business community and the partners that they've established in order to encourage the private sector to go out and encourage the growth and development of private sector businesses in our community.
I really don't understand. It seems like we have this capability within City Hall, and if it's too slow, I suppose you can speed it up. Instead, we're going to spend more money.
We're not going to spend any money, Councilman. Councilman, we're not going to spend any money on this. There's no dollars that will be spent by the city on this. If there's any cost that the city has as businesses are coming to use our rights of way, the brokerage agreement calls for us to be paid back. So there is no cost to the city to do this.
I love the idea of innovation. I don't understand how this encourages it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this is a terrific idea. It doesn't cost the city anything, like the city manager just said. So I support it wholeheartedly, and I move to approve.
Seconded by Councilmember Euler. Councilmember Riggenbach. Yes. Oh, sorry about that.
Thank you. I was just going to say that Distillery Labs is something that we've all been very enthused about for the last year and a half, or however long it's been. And the city manager and I, and many of us around this horseshoe, remember having this kind of business incubator on our legislative agenda as we worked with our state legislators for years, that this is something that we've wanted and we've aspired to have. And to think that we're one of 15 of these in the state of Illinois is quite a feather in our cap, and is something that people notice. So I just don't understand the pushback that when they come with actually perhaps the first tangible example of what the benefit of this Distillery Labs is, that we're giving them so much pushback. They're not asking for money. They're asking for us to prove our business-friendly approach, our eye to the future. I recently was able to get a tour of the natural fiber welding facility with the mayor, and that's amazing what's taking place in Peoria. So I'm enthusiastically going to support this and encourage my colleagues to as well. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I would add that the federal government is going to release a Smart City grant, I think on the 15th or 16th of September, and I've already asked the city manager to take a look at that RFP when it comes out. And this is something that we can potentially partner with Distillery Labs as well as other area partners to leverage existing resources beyond the 100,000, because with that funding we can really get more charging stations in our city, around our city, and plenty of other uses for smart city technologies. And I think it's again, that's going to be a rare opportunity too. But through collaboration, I think that we can probably be pretty collaborative in bringing more resources. So I'm a big supporter of working together in this fashion. Councilmember Greb?
Thank you very much. Director Stubbs is here from the Peoria Innovation Center. Could you come on up, please? As all of you know, Director Stubbs was here a couple of months ago to provide a presentation on the anniversary of the existence of Peoria Next Innovation Center. Director Stubbs, does this fit with what the mission has been of the Peoria Next Innovation Center? Are there any clouds you see here, any things that the council needs to avoid doing or should be doing?
I think it fits with Peoria Next in general from an innovation perspective. As you saw the map, Peoria Next is on the Hop Loop, right on Main Street. It covers downtown and the medical district and Bradley. I do have concerns related to, as Kurt mentioned, it's very serious from a right-of-way perspective. And so from an ability to actually monitor those, to know who's actually vetting those proposals. When I look at the agreement, it mentions the broker being Distillery Labs and the startups being sponsors. And I'm worried about the messaging and the relationship of requiring, from a sponsorship perspective, to be able to access that ability of rights away from Peoria. So those are some concerns that I have. In general, the idea of being able to offer a more quick package for startups to actually access the ability to do rights of way, I completely agree with. I'm just concerned about the current status of where Distillery Labs is at this time to be able to fulfill the ability to monitor those.
Director Stubbs, if the city of Peoria had direct command and control over this, and there was no middleman, as it were, would you have fewer or less queasiness about it?
Yes.
And that's exactly how I viewed it. I mean, conceptually, I think it's great, but it'd be like someone came in here and said, do you want to relinquish command and control, city council, of your police department? We would say, no, hell no. This is public works. This is our city right away. And I just don't see that we need to have an intermediary. You could always say, well, it always comes back to the city. I think the city ought to be deeply involved in this, and I don't think there should be that intermediary, the third party, if you will. I think the city of Peoria should be able to do this. So I have many of the same reservations Dr. Velpula expressed, and that our director of the Innovation Center has expressed. Conceptually, I think we're all on board. Yes. It's with the way that we administer this that I think we need to do some thinking about. And I appreciate your being here tonight. Mr. Setti, did you want to add to that?
I don't want to underplay the role that the city plays in this. The brokerage agreement, and I think actually Councilman Euler, thinking about the idea that we're able to broker these services, but it is not without the oversight of city staff and public works. It's our ability to say this is the fast pass to get through this permitting process. And so, with all due respect to Mr. Stubbs, it'll be incumbent upon Distillery Labs and its staff to be able to help monitor it. But it's not as though you are abdicating your responsibilities as the city, whether that's public safety or that's public works or community development. In fact, this builds, I think, a stronger partnership. It allows us to go out and market the city services that you haven't done yet because you haven't had the opportunity to think about it. You certainly could come up with a baseline agreement like this and send send one of your economic development staff out to make these pitches. Andrew Nui, who works for GPDC and under the auspices of Distillery Labs, was asked in October, I think it's October 4th, to moderate a panel about smart city innovation at the GovTech Innovation Conference in Washington, D.C. He's going to be in front of a room full of people who are interested in smart city things and smart city innovations. The fact that he can say to that group, come to Peoria, we've got this fast track to get you, to be able to test your products, your innovations in a real world environment without having to deal, you as an entrepreneur, and I think Kurt mentioned this, you're dealing with all sorts of headaches to begin with. This is one less headache that you have to deal with. But you as the city council, you as city staff are not abdicating your responsibilities in the least. All of the control, we wrest no control from you. Rather, we are simply brokering the services to an entrepreneurial community.
So I have to follow up. Go ahead and finish, Councilman Graham, because I have a follow-up question.
Yes. I guess, Mr. Setti, you are here in a temporary capacity only. Eventually, there will be someone else guiding Distillery Labs.
From your lips to God's ears.
I don't know who I'm dealing with. I mean, I know you, but we have an engineer from Hanson here. We have you. I just can't get my arms around this right now. Conceptually, I'm for it, but I think the devil's in these details. I think we should take a much closer look at these details before we approve this agreement. I really do.
Councilman, I'd like to add to that while this is streamlining the permit process, this will still all be done, as Chris mentioned, through when you need to go to it. Basically, what it does, it takes some of that burden off city staff to make sure all the boxes are checked, so that when they go to city to get that access or to go do that work, they would essentially be able to just turn over to Mr. Director Powers' staff and say, look, this is what I did. I went through Distillery Lab. Not unlike the passport that Peoria County is putting together for startups to be able to go and get resources to be able to go and use Director Stubbs' the facilities at Next. It's not unlike that. So to Chris's point, you're not going to be losing your control of your rights of way. You're basically not burdening the existing staff with the need to do that. Everything will be vetted before it comes to your staff to be able to review, if that makes sense. Because right now there'd be quite a few iterations. As when you apply for a permit, there's several iterations that would go through with permitting staff, with the staff at Public Works and planning and zoning and other things. And really the idea here is that Distillery Labs would try to check some of those boxes and vet that out and bring it to Public Works or to the correct department of the city when it's ready to go.
There's a part here, Corporation Council, that says Distillery Labs or startups will provide standard insurance to the city, including cyber liability insurance for each project. Can you elaborate on that?
I'd be happy to. If you look at Exhibit B to the agreement, and I do want to speak to the fact that this agreement was negotiated over the course of about 7.5 months between the city and Distillery Labs to make sure that we were accounting for all possible scenarios. That's extremely difficult to do when we're also talking about technology that we don't know what's going to be proposed to us yet. But as to the cyber liability insurance, we wanted to ensure that looking forward, anything that, even though the city system, for example, is a closed loop system and no one should have access to our 911 system, for example, but if for some reason one of the proposed projects were to somehow interfere with any of our public safety, 911, or general communications, that if there was a hack of that system, that cyber liability insurance was being provided to the city so that all of that data breach, all those steps that have to be taken after that occurs, that there was insurance there to cover those things.
So if the council approves this, we are signing off on a blanket permit for projects. sponsored by the Distillery Lab or a startup working in conjunction with Distillery Labs. Blanket.
No, Councilman, I would say that what we're signing off on is for them to bring us back the proposals as vetted. In comparison, when we were working through examples of different projects that could come to fruition in the next year, one of the things that was of concern for city staff was these proposals would involve multiple departments. So, for example, one project may need approval from planning and zoning, may need to be coordinated with the public works director, may need to have to be ran by our IS department, depending on what technology needs there were, what potential interferences or radio communication signals were involved, and then obviously would potentially need to be reviewed by legal too in case we had any privacy concerns. This was a method that would allow all of those initial concerns to be vetted up front so that a more thorough proposal could be brought to Public Works and the rest of city staff for review.
Well, in the second paragraph under background, there is a very clear declarative sentence. It says the city and Distillery Labs have developed an agreement that will serve as a blanket permit for projects sponsored by Distillery Lab or a startup working in conjunction with Distillery Labs. And I'm just not sure that we want to relinquish all of that control.
I would also refer you to section 27 where it says it does not preclude any city projects as well. So if there was a startup that wanted to come directly to the city, or if the city wanted to undertake their own smart city project, that could certainly be undertaken. If the word blanket permit gives you some heartburn, I'm sure we could certainly go back to the drawing table and work out some language that makes it more clear that the projects are still going to have to come back to the city for approval. I think when we use the phrase blanket permit, it was that they are permitted to do this initial assessment, do this initial vetting, and then bring those to us.
That's your understanding as well.
Yeah, that was the intent that I recall from the discussions with the legal counsel that developed the agreement and interim corporation counsel.
Okay. Councilman, you still have the floor.
Well, on this one, I would need time to further think about it before I would support it. If the votes are there, I just think that we need to vet this a little bit more. I think conceptually everybody in the room is for this, but this is a pretty complex agreement, and I would like to really think about it a little bit before we do this, because I'm not sure every aspect of it we should have. I don't think it should comport with comfortability on each aspect when you consider the extent to which they're getting into taxpayer resources, city resources, accessing areas that are really under the control, should be ideally under the control of Public Works Department, which works for the taxpayers of the city of Peoria. And I don't see any input either from our Public Works Department on this. Nothing. And I would think when you start talking about getting into kinds of things we're talking about here, I think our Public Works Department should be able to weigh in and have a complete understanding of what's going on. You're talking about multimodal mobility hubs, Wi-Fi hotspots, electric vehicle charging stations, digital kiosks.
Hasn't Public Works been involved, Manager? Council?
Thank you. I can tell you that the agreement was reviewed heavily with the IS department. It was provided to the Public Works Department, and I would leave it to Director Powers to comment on whether or not he provided comments on the agreement.
Is he here? Oh.
Yes, Director Powers is here.
Thank you.
And I'm not trying to be obstructionist.
No, I don't. No,
this is to me. This is a very significant agreement,
understand.
And I just want to be sure we're protecting our constituents. That's
Absolutely. Director
Director,
Powers, what are your concerns? Do you have you been heavily involved in? Are you comfortable with this? Do you feel like that you're giving up control?
I saw the agreement. I mean, I was not involved in the negotiation relative to what specifically would take place. That was Acting Corporation Counsel and Distillery Labs. As the Director of Public Works, obviously, I have concern anytime we're dealing with the rights of way or relinquishing any overall control. I don't believe the brokerage agreement does that. I believe we have the ability as the department, as the city, to enter and say cease and desist, stop. If there are privacy issues, I believe that we would vet them through legal. I think that we still have control of the right of way that they have outlined as the city, as a department. I think if I'm understanding this correctly, the idea is to incentivize businesses to bring technologies to that corridor and
Right.
make that corridor available. That could be up to and include, forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn, some of the buzzwords we're hearing now of autonomous vehicles and the infrastructure that might involve along a corridor, that we would avail them a more expedited opportunity to get into that particular corridor that we've outlined without going through, say, something that would be unique as an individual idea when the idea arose. It would be a part of a grander scheme or a grander idea that Distillery Labs would be sponsoring through this brokerage agreement, where we have the protections built in for any damages that may occur, any privacy invasions or incursions that may occur, anytime it would be a cut or something that may disturb the sidewalk or the existing infrastructure. So concerned, yes, because I'm the Public Works Director, but I'm not concerned about this particular corridor, or I think what the Distillery Labs concept is, which is to encourage innovation all around those corridors, which could expand into other corridors, quite frankly, into the smart city initiatives overall. So that's probably the 10,000-foot look at what my beliefs are in that regard.
It's helpful, but if we enter into this agreement and then you encountered problems, whether it's privacy or crossing the line in terms of what the city's responsibility is, we would want to know that so that the agreement could either be tweaked or terminated. I mean, we would want to know that from you and the manager and council as well.
That's correct. Well, I'm sorry, I don't know if you were soliciting input there. I agree with you. I would say on any one issue, not the overall issue, if we encounter any one issue where we believe that initiative specifically is a threat to the right-of-way or the people traversing on it or in any way whatsoever, we would intervene.
Okay.
That's the bottom line.
Okay. Councilman, did you have more questions for Director?
I'm still queasy. I don't know if Dr. Velpula's concerns have been met, but I think conceptually it's good, but I think that I have problems with it the way it's written right now without further review and contemplation. I'm just not smart enough to say I'm on board tonight. So if I have to vote on it tonight, I'll vote no. Okay. But that's not to say that I wouldn't vote yes after I get some further answers to questions. This is a big deal. It really is. And, bringing it forward tonight without more time for me to think about the brokerage agreement and get some questions answered. I've had some emails on it. And really, I love the area. I was just opining to my two colleagues to the left, this is Districts 1, 2, and 3. It looks like, we're involved in this in a very positive way, but right now I just am a little queasy about the brokerage agreement.
Okay. That's fair. I respect that. Councilman Riggenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think perhaps brokerage agreement is something that is another one of those terms that conjures up lots of things for lots of people. Let me see if I have this brokerage agreement straight. I'm a startup, and I'm a one-man shop or a three-man shop, whatever the case may be, and I'm intimidated to go to the Public Works Department at the city and figure out how I'm going to ask them for permission for this. Why would they give that to me? So Distillery Labs will be my landing pad that I come and show you everything that I would take to the city. You help me fill out the applications. You give me all the information I need, and then you will walk with me to City Hall and make that request. Because as I look at these bullet points here, it says Distillery Labs will be the intermediary. The second bullet point, the city will review and respond to all proposals. So we're not giving anything up.
Right.
We're not giving anything up. We're just making it easier for the startup to work through the system. Is that oversimplifying things?
I don't believe so. If you actually go back and you look and you to the slide and you start looking at it in the context that you're talking about, you know, we're essentially trying to connect these folks to resources that they have to break down those barriers and those hurdles to being able to grow or to start and grow their business. You know, completely understanding and agreeing with Councilman Graham that this is a serious matter because it's city right of way. As a taxpayer, we you know, that's you guys' job to steward that. But the idea is that yes, that Distillery Labs staff would be able to get them in a spot to where they could get that and gain that approval in a very, very quick manner and know what boxes to check as you go through that list.
Because we're not giving Distillery Labs the approval tonight. We're just to put it in.
You're essentially becoming a part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, just like Peoria Next and other places, to where you're saying that this is the floor. It's not unlike it. As business people, we always like to know what the floor is and what the risks are and what's there, and we'd like to know what the ceiling is, right? Or we like to think about the blue sky because that's more fun. But knowing what that floor is, this sets that floor and says, here's where you can go find your resource to help you figure out what you need to do to get to that blue sky.
And you know, if I can take it one step further, with some of these grants we have with the EVGC housing rehab program, for instance, I hear from residents all the time how complicated our intake process is. So the East Bluff Community Center has staff that will help these folks complete the application, make sure that all the boxes are checked, make sure they have all their paperwork in place. So perhaps we need to offer them a brokerage agreement. You know, I say that facetiously, sorry. But I think that we might be overthinking this, and that this is going to actually accelerate Peoria's step to become that innovation smart city that we all aspire to. So
I think if we have problems along the way, we address those problems and make some adjustments, and we can do that.
Absolutely.
Councilman Graham?
Mayor, this entity has no staff at the present time.
We got Chris Setti. Well, part-time. Chris, can you speak to the hiring of a director?
I appreciate that comment.
You don't have a staff in place.
We don't have any fully dedicated staff. I will say that we do. I mean, I am staffed to Distillery Labs. It's now a part of my job. I realize it's an interim role, but we will hire an executive director once the construction plan is set. We have a budget that would include program staff that would actually manage the smart mobility vertical within Distillery Labs. We've been working with Hanson Professional, which has been amazing to work with. We have a team of 3 that work on the programming side of things for Distillery Labs. That is Andrew Nui, who works for GPEDC, but we have detailed him to Distillery Labs. Aaron Gigas, who works for OSF Healthcare, who is a half-time employee who is considered staff of Distillery Labs, and Nate Dominigini from the G-Beta program that runs the accelerator. So it may not look like we have staff because we don't have a building, but we have been doing all of this saying that while the building is important, the programming is even more important. And so we have the ability to manage this process at the stage that it's at. And as Distillery Labs comes online and the staffing for it comes online, we'll be able to do even more. So, as has been pointed out, you have the right to terminate, and a unilateral ability to terminate the agreement too, if you're finding that it is not serving your interests as the city of Peoria.
I've never imagined that we would establish a brokerage agreement without a staff to deal with or company and have an engineer. We love Hanson, engineer and a former assistant city manager. No, I'm not going to vote for it.
Okay. Councilman Velpula?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we see two entities standing right there. Okay, now one has a staff, and we know Peoria Next has house. Even the natural fiber building came out of Peoria Next, and let's say if they come out with an idea, or somebody reaches out to Peoria Next, so then Peoria Next will go have a crosstalk with Distillery Labs if we have this blanket agreement. And Corporation Council just said that, okay, there will be a way where an individual can go and file their paperwork. But when we are trying to set up an ordinance saying, oh, this is the blanket protocol, we gave it to it, even the city will say, oh, we have an agreement with the Distillery Labs, go to Distillery Labs. I think everything is right. Everybody is striving to get the innovation to City of Peoria in their own ways. But we need to be mindful of the segregation that we are trying to come up with. One has staff, one has ideas, and one is extremely connected. So I don't know how we see this. I don't know if it is so mandatory for us to make a decision tonight, because if you wanted to go ahead and take the voting, that's up to the council. But for me, there are several things now. Just now, the Corporation Council mentioned that there will be data breach, and then somebody will cover for that. So there are issues that we may encounter going forward, and we just don't know where we are entering into. Maybe, take a step back and revisit again. I mean, that's the way I see it, and that's my own opinion. I just leave it to the council and your judgment. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Madam Clerk, we have a motion on the floor.
We do.
Madam Mayor?
Go ahead and finish.
Madam Mayor?
We have a motion by Councilmember Jensen, seconded by Councilmember Euler for item A, to approve item A.
Okay. All right. Councilman Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple things. In most brokerage relationships, there's somebody on the other side. We don't seem to have anyone on the other side of this deal. I suppose if they want to go forward, they need this license or whatever from the city. This makes me uncomfortable. It seems to me that you hire a broker that has some experience. You hire a broker that's been around, knows what they're doing. This is a whole new idea. It seems to me they ought to try to prove themselves the way as a facilitator for people on their own, and if they're a really good facilitator, great. The second item is I am not clear, is this an exclusive brokerage, or is this brokerage open to anyone who's qualified or perhaps unqualified?
The manager's got to answer that.
Yeah.
Councilman, I'll answer that question first. The answer is it's not an exclusive it's a brokerage agreement in the area, the geographically defined area for Distillery Labs. But the city can continue to have agreements with other startup firms and anybody else that we may want to do something with in our right-of-way. So that is not precluded by that. So, but if I could ask Mr. Setti to explain who is Distillery Labs, who is your board of directors, who are the entities that created Distillery Labs, so that we could start at that level first and see who we're talking about, because I think that's being lost here, and there's more to who Distillery Labs actually is than what has been discussed this evening.
And if I might, I am the staff for Distillery Labs. I am staff for Distillery Labs. So while I may have interim up by my name, it is my responsibility. I sign the checks. I do the I manage the grants and I manage the construction process. So I am the staff for Distillery Labs, and I will be responsible for this until such time as I am replaced, which is sooner than later, I hope. Distillery Labs is a nonprofit corporation. We have a board of directors that includes Bob Searing as the board chair. He's the CEO of OSF Healthcare. Michelle Conger, who's the chief innovation officer from OSF, is the vice chair. Dr. Sheila Quirk-Bailey is the secretary of the board. I am I think I'm the treasurer. I can't remember now. I was on the board before. I may not actually be on the board at the moment. I believe I am the treasurer of the board. I take that back. It's Michelle is the treasurer. I don't have an officer role. Also on the board is Jody Howard from Caterpillar. She runs the tech center. Dr. Standiford from Bradley University, and we have an entrepreneur on the board. Her name is Anna Palmer. She is we'll call her a Peoria alumni who has started and exited 2 very successful businesses. She lives out in Massachusetts and is the principal of Flybridge Capital, I believe is the name of it. It was a venture capital firm. So we do have a very strong board of directors who have been very engaged, especially Mr. Searing, who is running a really big company in the meantime. I just want to be clear, Distillery Labs has staff. That staff is me, and I will be in charge of making sure that this happens and happens well.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, and thank you, Mr. Setti. Mr. Manager, are you indicating that the item on the map, the Phase 1 item, are you saying that Distillery Labs is going to have an exclusive inside those dotted lines?
No. What I'm saying is that if they bring startups forward within that area that want to work within our rights of way, they will have, as has been described, a kind of a fast pass process to work through to gain access to the rights of way. But that doesn't preclude the city from doing something else in that same geographic area.
Does that preclude the city from, Mr. Manager, using another broker?
No.
And is it possible to have other brokers?
I don't see so at this point in time. I don't see any reason for us to. I think what we would continue to do is to move down this path with Distillery Labs, or go down the path of our own path if we were doing that.
Okay, so it's a monopoly situation.
I would not describe it as a monopoly.
I'm sure you would not.
And Councilman Kelly, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to get that. How exclusive is this? And typically, when people get a broker, there's a track record or something involved. So, thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Councilmember Graham.
I think what we're about to vote on is the filing of the presentation, but not the approval of the agreement. That would be item B, correct?
That's true.
I would just say, since this would seem to be an auspicious moment, I think this has come to us too soon without a lot of information. We're just hearing tonight who some of the players are that would be party to this brokerage agreement. This should have been disclosed earlier to us. Also, Section 26 on warranty exclusions. Council, can you illumine this for the council, Corporation Council, what the warranty exclusions mean, which are just shouting to us in big, bold letters?
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you, Councilman. The warranty exclusion is much like you would see on any software that you're purchasing, that what you're getting is a service on an as-is basis, and they can't make any guarantee or warranty of merchantability or fitness for a particular use of those particular products. That would be accurate in this case, since these are, beta test, anticipated to be beta test of projects.
I personally think that, I think it's fine for us to receive and file this, but I think that this should be something that is coming to us with a recommendation from the director of the Peoria Next Innovation Center. That's how it should properly be done. And unless and until the director of Peoria Next Innovation Center signs on to this, and it's integrated with what they've been doing and doing very well all these years, producing over $400 million worth of startup, unless and until it has that kind of approval, and we, as Dr. Velpula pointed out, a joint press conference, and we have some of these questions that are answered and a little more information on the players, and until we have a staff in place, I think it's premature to approve any smart city brokerage agreement as it's currently outlined. But I think we should go ahead and vote on A, and then we'll vote on B.
We've got a motion to receive and file the presentation. Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Now we have B. Do we have a motion moved by Councilmember Jensen, seconded by Councilmember Euler, to approve the Smart City Agreement between the City of Peoria and Peoria Innovation Hub doing business as Distillery Labs? We have a motion and a second. Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick clarifying question. When projects are happening through Distillery Labs, can you talk about the communication between Distillery Labs and the city to just ensure that the city isn't in the dark on these projects? Because it seems there's some anxiety that maybe some things will be happening in dark alleys and we're not going to know about it.
Yeah, I think the idea here, Councilman, is that the entrepreneur would be, it'd be almost exactly like Councilman Riggenbach described, where they would be able to go to Distillery Labs and get essentially counsel as to how to get through that process. And there'd be a bit of a feedback loop there. I think each one of these innovations would likely be a bit of a snowflake, so exactly how that feedback loop happens is going to be a little bit different. If you're talking about a situation where we're going to, if we have, for instance, Deep Walk from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign wanted to come in and do LiDAR scanning of sidewalks and ramps, that process is pretty simple for Public Works to be able to handle that, because we're talking about someone with a vest with their cell phone walking down the sidewalk and then taking that data and scanning it and processing it back through some of their proprietary algorithms and things. So that's very simple. Getting Grid Matrix, for instance, who's one of the startups looking to come in that we discussed earlier, and getting them to be able to put a camera on a mast arm on Director Power, on a facility that Director Powers' staff looks after, that's going to require, multiple conversations, but it's not going to require, I think the idea here is it doesn't require Public Works staff to have to dedicate more time for their permit staff and for them to be able to work through, knowing that there's a staff member or there's someone from Distillery Labs to help them through those communications and meeting the requirements that are necessary.
Thank you. So yeah, one of my recommendations may be just to, further maybe have monthly meetings, recurring meetings between the Director of Public Works and Distillery Labs, whether that's with you, Mr. Setti, and others, just to make sure that the city is aware of any ongoing projects, forthcoming projects. So, I think just communication will be key.
As of right now, I can honestly say that the Mach 9 robotics pilot that we're talking about is to scan city streets to help with asset management projects. Additionally, the Deep Walk project is a pilot where city staff is looking at multiple ways to inventory and improve sidewalk assets and meet public rights-of-way requirements, accessibility requirements. And then lastly, through the CSO, we're actually, and the data processing part here, we're actually installing, and down in on Adams Street in the Complete Streets district, we're actually installing sensors to monitor how much water is being infiltrated back into the ground, and basically how well those I guess appurtenances within the built environment are working, and to help the city meet the CSO requirement. So those have been I guess worked through with Public Works and the city engineer and her staff to make sure that those are coordinated with some of the efforts that the city already has ongoing.
Thank you. I yield, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Councilmember Raya, sorry.
Director Stubbs, on Part B, it indicates that, and this is what's coming before the council shortly, to approve the Smart City Brokerage Agreement between the City of Peoria and Peoria Innovation Hub. Is that you, Peoria Innovation Center?
No, the Peoria Innovation Hub is the original name for Distillery Labs.
Okay. And my question to you is, how could we modify this to make it better, to relieve some of the anxiety some of us have?
I saw the agreement late last night, so I haven't had the opportunity to actually review that from an actual actionable perspective of what that looks like. But in general, as I mentioned, it's not as much of an issue of what it says and how it's going to do it. It's more of an issue of, it's the timing, right, and the ability to vet these and bring them together and have the staff to walk through entrepreneurs of what this process is and bring them up and keep the city communicated with what's happening. The agreement starts tomorrow or today, from my understanding, if it gets approved. And so the ability to do that, I'm a little concerned from that perspective immediately. The other issue, as I mentioned, that I'm concerned about is labeling the startups as sponsors, and the indication of what that means and what they would have to pay to get the ability to get the accelerated rights that come through this agreement that you're providing to Distillery Labs.
We aren't if the implication was that Distillery Labs would be making money off of the startups to use the right of way, that is not happening at all.
I would add to that from my sitting in with former executive director Lehman and staff that were thinking this through, the only fees that a startup would have to pay would be the insurance to purchase insurance that's required of them to do so, which would be required of anyone who wanted to permit within the right of way, as I understand it.
We hear that. I didn't see it in the agreement that precluded any of that activity. And so I was concerned about the wording and the implication of the fact that we were labeling that agreement as a broker and sponsors of Distillery Labs and Distillery Labs sponsors to receive those rights. So that would be another thing, as far as from just a wording perspective, I think would be helpful to clarify.
Mayor, I think we should defer this until we can get some of these questions answered for 2 weeks, and that the director of the Peoria Innovation Center has comfort with this for the reasons he just outlined. And I think we should defer it for 2 weeks. If we get the Peoria Innovation Center on board and questions answered, he didn't see it until last night. I didn't even know who some of these shadowy players were, not that they're shadows, but until today. I think it's irresponsible to approve it tonight until we have the I's dotted and the T's crossed. That's why I'll vote no, not because I wouldn't eventually support it. So,
Is there a second? Second to
I'll second
defer,
it.
seconded by Councilmember Velpula. I don't think it's unreasonable to get more information. I would like to see the support of the second district council member, considering downtown is a big part of the territory in that geographic map that we have. But, I think this is something that we don't want a strong split vote on. This is a 3-year agreement that's going to impact our city, hopefully in a very positive way. And I would like to see more support for it. So I support the deferral for 2 weeks. Councilmember Riggenbach?
I think we've made a mountain out of a molehill here. But it just concerns me when we call some of these major players that have invested in Distillery Labs shadowy characters. I mean, that's taking it down a dangerous path, but I think this is a huge opportunity for us. And Mr. Setti, and Kurt, forgive me for not pronouncing your last name, with a 2-week deferral, how will that impact these 4 startups that are just chomping at the bit to do business in Peoria?
We actually got word that the changes that we were required in an SPR grant that would help those startups to basically get them through this process were approved by IDOT earlier this week or late last. And we need to still draft the sponsor agreement, frankly. So a couple weeks probably isn't going to make a difference either way. I mean, just in the spirit of we want to the right of way is important. So for all of us. So I don't think that'll make a big difference from that perspective. I would say that continuing to drag it out would that's that would be something that we'd want to try to avoid. But we're really working through here to try to answer the questions.
Thank you for that clarification. And with that background, I guess I will reluctantly support a deferral as well.
Okay. Council?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since we are looking at a 2-week deferral, I would just respectfully ask, as all of you review this agreement and digest it and perhaps have suggestions, that you forward that feedback to me. And I welcome the comments about, sponsor and broker. I think we patterned that after something we saw in Dallas, so there was no magic reason we picked the word sponsor, and could certainly come up with better language if that's what the council wants. But to keep you on track with timing, we'll do our best if you can give us that feedback to have something at the next meeting that maybe incorporates all those comments.
That's
Thank you.
great. If there's any tweaks that make people feel more comfortable, like the word sponsor, I think that might be helpful. Councilmember Jackson?
My question was answered, and if 2 weeks is what we need, then I'm in favor of a deferral. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Jensen?
That my question too was, I just wanted to make sure it didn't impact the 4 that are waiting, chomping at the bits to come to Peoria. But I think you answered that to Councilor Riggenbach, so I can support reluctantly as well a deferral. I think this is such a good thing, and we, like Councilor Riggenbach said, worked on getting this going years ago, so I don't want to delay it any more than we have to.
We have a motion on the floor to defer for 2 weeks. Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk? Thank you, gentlemen.
22-311 is a communication from the City Manager and Director of Community Development with a request to approve the application and program guidelines for the 2022 Utility Assistance Program.
Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to turn the floor over to Director Doolin to discuss this item.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. If many of you remember, a few weeks ago when we held the policy session for the American Rescue Plan, we introduced a potential program to help with utility assistance this winter for residents in the city of Peoria due to ongoing rising electric costs in the city of Peoria. This is the program guidelines that we'd like your approval of. If approved this evening, we will launch the program shortly, hopefully to have it awarded to residents in place to get utility assistance in November, December, January, and February of this winter. The program as designed would be able to provide $150 per month for each of those months for residents who are below 80% of area median income. As I mentioned during the policy session, we're very worried about the different programs that are available throughout the state. For example, the state-run program goes up to about twice the poverty level, which equates to about 60% of area median income. So there's this gap between 60 and 80% of people who need some emergency assistance due to the rising costs that we feel this program could help. It won't necessarily exclude those who may not qualify for those other programs, but we're really going to be pointing residents to utilize those programs first, so this money goes farther and helps more people. And then as council requested during the policy session, we will come back with a report back to give a report back on the demand and how the program's going to possible expand it if necessary based on the demand we get. And we will report that back to you once the application closes. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on the program.
Seeing no questions, is there a motion to approve? Moved by Councilmember Ruckriegel, seconded by Councilmember Allen. Paul, thanks. Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, we have two that have stepped out.
I'm sorry?
We don't have Councilmember Sear or Euler here.
We still have 6 left, 7.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you want to wait?
I just want to make sure you were aware.
Yeah.
Okay. Madam Clerk?
Okay. 22-312 is a communication from the City Manager and Finance Director Comptroller with a request to adopt an ordinance amending the City of Peoria 2022-2023 biennial budget related to the use of general fund balance in amount not to exceed $350,000 in 2022 for workers' compensation claims.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you. Our Finance Director, Craddy, is here. I'd like to let him take this item if I could.
Mr. Craddy?
This ordinance in front of you tonight is to increase the funding for workers' compensation claims based off the claims that were approved on the consent agenda tonight. So this would make sure that we have the funds available for our workers' comp claims for the rest of the year.
Sure. Any questions for Director Craddy? Councilmember Ruckriegel?
Just a question for City Manager. Do we need a supermajority on this because it's changing the budget?
We do.
Thank you.
Councilmember Graham?
I think we got Councilor Sear approaching his desk, and then we would, if we all vote for it, we would have 8. Otherwise, if somebody peels off, we don't.
And we still have Councilmember Kelly.
Okay, that's right. Okay.
Can I get a motion?
Yes, move to approve as outlined.
Seconded by Councilmember Allen. Cast your ballots. Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-313 is a communication from the City Manager and Finance Director Comptroller with a request to receive and file the 2021 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report audited by Clifton Larson Allen, LLP. And on your desk, there are a number of books.
Heavy books. Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have Adam Pulley from Clifton Larson Allen who's here to give us a quick overview of our 2021 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Mr. Pulley?
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you. I realize you all have heavy books in front of you. I just brought this to present, so we'll just go through that little piece right there. If I can get this going. Okay. First and foremost, as far as the results of the audit for 2021, we did have an unmodified, or in other words, a clean audit opinion over FY21's financial statements. That is the best opinion that the city can receive. It is worth noting that there are the two pension funds within the statements, as well as a foreign fire insurance fund, are audited by other auditors, but they also express an unmodified or a clean opinion. I know I've noted in past years, and I will do so again, that within that heavy book, towards the beginning, there is a section known as a management's discussion and analysis. I always recommend that is a good summary synopsis to review to get a sense of the year 2021 from the financial perspective there. Moving along, the financial statements are really broken down into two different bases of accounting. And on the government-wide statement of accounting, this is a full accrual basis of accounting. It includes everything. It includes capital assets, depreciation, change in net pension liability, and other long-term liabilities, things of that nature. That's on a financial statement basis that I'm sure you're not used to seeing month to month. It's not on the budgetary basis, if you will. Nevertheless, we give an audit opinion on that basis. And within that basis of accounting, jumping to the bottom bullet point there, the change in net position. In other words, you can call that profit or loss of the city for the year 2021 was an increase of $51 million compared to FY20, which was a decrease of $149 million. I realize on the surface that looks like a large swing, and it is, and there can be large swings here and there when you're talking about all those facets that are a part of the basis of accounting. But I will remind everybody, as far as FY20 is concerned, the very end of 2020 is when the EPA, the environmental remediation obligation, all was recognized on the financial statements, which was to the tune of close to that $140 some odd million. Now that said, looking at the modified accrual basis of accounting, or what I imagine the council is more used to seeing, meeting to meeting, more of a budgetary current basis, going down to the bottom there, that bottom bullet point, the change in the total fund balance of the governmental funds was an increase of $27 million during 2021. Compare that to basically flat in 2020. That was for the governmental funds, just the stormwater utility fund. There was an increase of $12.2 million in net position during 2021 versus 7.3 in 2020. The next few slides are really more for reference. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. Really, I want to get more to the sort of potential, the findings or audit results. So as far as I already talked about the financial statements and that we expressed a unmodified or a clean opinion. Now, in addition to the financial statements, we also perform an audit over the federal grant programs. In other words, a single audit. As you all know, there's been a lot of federal funds, new federal funds that's been going around to different municipalities. We have seen an uptick, as you might imagine, in the past couple of years in terms of audit findings as it relates to new requirements, new streams of federal funding. It is worth noting that we did test that for the city, of course, this year, and with those programs, there were no findings that we came across in the city's audit, and I felt that was noteworthy. Now, the one audit finding we did have is one that I would classify as being anticipated. In a way, it is a repeat finding. We did have audit adjustments, material audit adjustments. in working with the finance department. Again, it was anticipated that we, as the external auditors, not a part of the internal control structure of the city, would help with some of the audit adjustments from some of those different bases of accounting. But other than that, we did not have any findings. I will say that last year, other than findings, we did have one other recommendation, if you will, and that was around the depreciation values at the city. A couple years ago, or a few years ago, the city made a change in financial software, and during that time, that transfer of information, still for reasons not really quite known, the methodology, the depreciation on some of the value of the city's assets did not quite transfer over appropriately, and it wasn't really determinable to know how much or how little that was an impact based on our testing, but we had recommended to the city to look into that. Finance department this year dug in and took a look at that, found out. I still don't know if we know entirely what happened, but was able to determine what the dollar value was that needed to be changed. So there was we performed audit on that, on the suggested changes, and it resulted in a restatement of the beginning net position for the city. Actually, the value of those assets should have been higher in past years to about the tune of $7 million or so. So that was reflected in this year's audit. Otherwise, there is a governance letter that we issue every year. This would be our opportunity to express to the council if we came across any difficulties, significant disagreements with management. We had none of those, so it's largely boilerplate language. There's not a whole lot in there otherwise. And I already mentioned the restatement. That is a part of that governance letter. That's really all I had to present. I certainly want to take the time to thank the finance department, all of management that helped us through the audit process. It is a long process, but we do appreciate the collaboration there.
Thank you, Mr. Pulley. Any questions? Councilman Sear, you don't have any questions?
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, I do.
This is your favorite area.
Unfortunately, I just had a couple of questions. Because I have this discussion with the city manager all the time. I don't see it in here, but what was the increase between the revenues, our revenues from 2020 to 2021?
Should correctly, difference in revenues from 2020 to 2021. It's one of the slides I skipped over real quick, so my apologies. But those are, as far as the governmental funds are concerned, that graph shows a breakdown of taxes versus intergovernmental. That dark blue bar is going to be 2020, and the lighter blue is going to be 2021. So the largest increase, probably hard to read if you don't have it in front of you, but the largest increase was going to be in taxes, and that was roughly $23 million or so. Intergovernmental was also a large increase with grants, and that about doubled from 10 to 20 million.
So what was the increase? Same question, but for the expenditures.
This graph does not have the total of everything that I could look at the exact number there, but broken down to the different categories. Roughly $2 million increase in general government. Again, $2 million for public works. Really, most of the expenditures were roughly similar outside of the far right where you get into the debt service, principal and interest, and sometimes this can have some swings based on the timing of cities refunding of debt and those transactions. So that's why there was a bigger swing in 2021.
So you really amplify my point. I mean, and Mr. Manager knows that. I'm just so disappointed every year where we, as a financial advisor, we seem to always issue more debt, and we just can't live within our means. And again, this slide shows clearly we issued another $12 million in new debt in that time span. And I just like to note that because every year we issue more debt instead of try to live within our means. And it just, for me, it's just hard to accept.
Yeah, the one caveat I would add with the 2020 to 2021 comparison for our debt is if you remember at the beginning of the pandemic, the city issued what they call a scoop and toss bond, where we pushed some of our principal and interest payments off into the future because of the concerns with where the financial picture might be during the pandemic. And that is one of the larger reasons why we saw that jump between 2020 and 2021.
But I understand the explanation, but overall, our overall budget was around, using round numbers, around $203 million, correct? And the following year, our budget went from 203 to about 282, if I'm correct. Is that correct? So that's $80 million. Let's use round numbers. 80. We increased our expenditure by $80 million with a new $15 million debt service, correct?
That is, we did issue $10 million for ongoing capital projects that included $5 million in refunding for a previously issued debt.
Yeah. So I'm glad you pointed that out. At least the debt is issued for capital expenditures, which obviously there's depreciation that come with that. That's great, but still, my point's still the same as a financial advisor. I just wish we could live within, especially when our revenues are so great. Our financial statement are very, very strong. Especially this year, but the last couple of years, especially this year, we're financially, we're very, very strong. And and we're going to go into a budget session the next few months. It's just hard for me to issue new debt when we're so strong financially. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Any other questions? Quick question, just how long was the time period between you started the audit and then the time that you finished?
We started some limited interim procedures in the February-March timeframe, but really final field work where we start the bulk of the audit late April, early May, if I remember the timing this year correctly.
February through May. Is that right?
We would have started late April to May, my apologies, for final field work, and really that extended through, well, pretty recently.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Motion to receive and file. Moved by Councilman Velpula, seconded by Councilmember Sear. Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pulley. Thank you, Mr. Director Craddy. Madam Clerk?
We are at unfinished business.
Is there any unfinished business?
No. Then we are at new business.
Councilmember Greb, new business.
Madam Mayor, I appreciate the opportunity to address this. As you look around the chamber and you see the names of each of us on the desks, you don't see a D or you don't see an R. And that's because we all run nonpartisan. So I'm going to ask this to be done in the most unpartisan way possible as information to all of our constituents. There is much concern in this community about the Safety Act, and it's going to go into effect on the 1st of January of 2023. And yes, January is not far off. So I would like to have some information, because believe me, we need to know what impact this Safety Act will have on our citizens as it currently exists, and also on the performance and the tasks that are performed by our Peoria police officers every single day in this city. I imagine the report back, Mr. Manager, will involve an assessment by the Superintendent of Police as well as our legal staff, but I'll let you coordinate those departments because that's your job. But we need to know. And we've seen all kinds of things on the internet. Be careful when you say that. Things that maybe should be reinforced in terms of how our citizens are viewing this as January 1 looms, or that would repudiate some of the concerns that are out there. I will tell you this, the Safety Act, as you all know, if you've been following, has been changed from its original iteration. and wisely so. And there were some hijackings of vehicles involving some high profile, I'm not saying characters, I said persons. Be very careful not to put words in my mouth. And that Safety Act was modified to come down hard on people who are involved in vehicular hijackings because of on-the-ground realities in our cities. I think this is a work in motion. But I'll tell you what, when the 1st of January rolls around, we better have a pretty good idea what's still in that bill that maybe needs to be altered, if anything. Because I'm asked virtually every day by constituents. Every neighborhood meeting I go to, I was with a couple of you recently at a neighborhood association to the north of the 2nd District, and they were asking all kinds of questions. And so I would like that presentation made, manager, if we could, at our next meeting on the 27th.
Is that reasonable time period?
We'll be happy to put some information together for you. I know that the legal department sent out a pretty large packet and analysis of the Safety Act previously, so we'll send that information back out to you, as well as some follow-up from the police department as well.
Okay, thank you. There is a lot of misinformation out there on Facebook and social media, so yes. New business, Councilmember Riggenbach.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For those of you in the East Bluff and who have interests in the Wisconsin Avenue project, that was something we had in last year's capital budget, and this year it's all been about design. And I just have to give kudos to our city engineer, Andrea Kloffenstein, and assistant engineer, Paula Mendez, as well as Cindy Lose, and Director Power. You've got a great team there. What we're going to do, because this corridor, as I've been championing the work to be done, it seems so simple. You improve the street, add a bike path, put in a sidewalk, but the right-of-way is so challenging that we've encountered many, many obstacles along the way. So what we're going to do on September 29th, they're going to go out and actually spray paint and put in little tape markings of how the proposed project would affect the homeowners in the area. And I think this is a really creative, out-of-the-box thinking. So between 3 and 6 p.m. on September 29th, Public Works will have information tables set up at Wisconsin and Arcadia by the Heartland Health Plaza there, and then again at Gift and Wisconsin. So it'll give you a chance to see firsthand what the impact of this project will have, and we'll continue to get input from the residents in the area, but I'm really excited that we're at this point and it isn't last year. So
Great.
Thank you. That's all I had.
You're welcome. Member Valpula.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to, invite the council and the mayor for the 20th annual Mark Linder Walk for the Mind. So Mark Linder was a visionary who passed away with brain cancer. But before he passed away, he saw that we need to have awareness, and he started a fundraiser, and he passed away even without walking the first walk. But that continued till 20 years, and everything that he did, actually, I'm very connected to that because we do research on brain cancers. So the walk is we are celebrating his 20th anniversary, and the walk is on September 24th. That's a Saturday at Riverplex at 7:30 a.m.
7:30 a.m.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any other new business? Madam Clerk?
We are at citizens' opportunity to address the city council, and we have not received any cards, but
Okay, we can keep moving.
we do not have an executive session, so we would be at adjournment.
Can I get a motion to adjourn, moved by council member? Oh, if you would have had to fill out a card, sir. Sorry. Did you not know about a card? Okay, well, come on then. Okay.
This evening. I do apologize as well. I didn't get the email sent to you, Mayor, or City Manager Patrick. But thank you guys, City Council members. I don't know if all of you did or did not see the email I did send over last night. Councilmember Ruckberg, I appreciate you letting me know that you did see it. But very urgent issue that needs addressed. My name is John Hopkins, owner of Neon Bison there. I know several of you guys here, so you may know me, but for the ones that don't. So this last week, we received a letter from the city about the per gaming terminal fee. This is, like I said, an ongoing issue really since February that the change has been made. I'm really surprised that we haven't been able to get something taken care of on it. As a reminder, the Illinois Gaming Board ruled that any terminal fee must be equally split between the gaming establishment and the video gaming operator or the company that owns the machines. The letter we received this week from the city read this. It said, currently there has been no change to the fee structure nor the process. The fees are as follows. Video gaming terminal fees are $500 per terminal. $250 is to be remitted by the video gaming operator, and the other $250 to be remitted by the establishment, which would be my business. The next line read, video gaming operator fees remain $1,000 per terminal and are to be remitted by the video gaming operator. The fee structure is obviously in violation of the IGB ruling, and the video game operator will not pay the full $1,000 per terminal without passing on 50% of that to me, the establishment, or any other business in the city here. That fee was created originally, from my understanding, for the large video game operators to pay. And as a small business owner, so we have 6 machines, that's going to add an additional $3,000 out of our pocket this year. And I stand here not just for us, but for the other 65 operators or establishments, here in the city that this issue has not been resolved for. So I'm suggesting 3 things. I'd like, hopefully you can address them tonight if possible, but number 1, take the amount that is collected for the $1,000. There's 66 places of business. We collect $327,000, or there's 327 machines, so $327,000 that's brought in with that $1,000 fee. I'm suggesting that instead we divide that by the 66 locations, that's $5,000 per location. That would then bring in actually an additional $3,000 to the city and be not in violation of the IGB ruling and also not hurt small businesses. Secondly, I would change the wording, split that $1,000 terminal fee just like the $500. This would not change the amount brought in by the city. It would create then that we're in accordance to the IGB, but it would hurt small businesses. You would be adding an additional, and we are, without changing the wording as well, we're adding an additional $163,500 to small businesses. Third, I'd recommend, if neither of those or other options are out there, place a hold on any of these city licensing fees until a resolution can be found. Thank you.
Thank you for your recommendations, and you may want to make an appointment to follow up with council or with our legal counsel. You can probably touch bases after them.
Sure. Yeah, I'm more than willing. Like I said, I know this has been at some point brought up multiple times since February. I don't know to what extent. I haven't attended those meetings, but I'm more than willing to do that. I just, this is something I think that we should be able to get taken care of after 7 months, 8 months, whatever.
Thank you, sir. We did get a motion to adjourn, right?
Yes.
You moved in, Councilman Sear. Before we do that, you had a comment, Councilman Graham?
I probably should have recognized Mr. Hopkins when the item came up in reference to the length of time one has to wait to get a license, but I didn't know that you necessarily wanted to speak to it at that time, so he's very legitimate, and I'm glad that you exercised discretion letting him speak, because while that wasn't on the agenda earlier, it's something we will need to discuss. Thank you for coming, Mr. Hopkins.
Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Kelly,
Aye.
thank you for your service. We're adjourned. What time is it?